Welcome, everybody, to the season finale of Deadliest Warrior podcast.
Season 2.
Season 2 finale. Yeah,
No, we're done.
I didn't say series. I said season. It should have been the series finale of the show.
Right.
I'm your host today, Craig Taylor, joined by my co-host
Matt Davis. I'll be representing the Israeli Commandos.
Yes, down there we got.
I'm Lucas, representing Navy SEAL.
And joining us, our guest.
At this point, Dan's back.
The closest thing to Navy SEAL we could get.
Oh, that's sad.
We have Dan
Here
back,
for the SEALs.
live and in person. Of course, we got Brendan on the ones and twos.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, we got Navy SEAL versus Israeli Commando. Anyone have any initial thoughts on this episode? Because I think there are some obvious comparisons to Green Beret versus Spetsnaz. Probably it's like a sequel episode in some respect. It's for the target demographic to flex their little military boner.
Definitely the spiritual successor to Green Beret Spetsnaz. And I remember, when I was, however old I was watching this, a lot of hype, a lot rode on this episode for me.
I was going to say the same teenager energy.
Right, yeah. I was like, all right, this is the redemption. Like the Navy SEALs have to win this or I'm, going to cry, basically. Needless to say, I went back and watched it. I do have thoughts relating to Green Beret Spetsnaz and how this episode relates to it, but I'm going to save those for the final thoughts of the episode.
SEAL Team 6. Ever heard of them?
Are they deadly?
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is also Max Geiger's final episode on the show.
This is Maxie Baby's last episode.
We'll see if I feel like editing a
that's sad to
tribute.
think about.
Right, yeah.
Personal friend of the show, personal friend of mine. He was at my wedding. So I think with Green River Spetsnaz, it's kind of like the original sin of the show. Everything sort of goes back to that.
Right.
So
That's why it's the best episode.
Yeah, that's true.
The most
Back to
crucial.
modern this time. I feel like we've been on Ancient Warriors for like a pretty good stint now. At least the order that we've recorded them in. Just kidding. Everything is recorded sequentially.
Yeah. Who knows when this fucking thing's coming out? So starting out, we got Navy SEALs, who are described as America's amphibious special force, trained to neutralize any enemy, anytime, anywhere. And the Israeli Commandos, Israel's top secret assassins who fend off terrorists dedicated to destroy the Jewish nation. Which I feel like a few Palestinians might disagree with that phrasing, but we're not going to touch on that, at least right now. And the Navy SEAL, I don't want to get too analytical, but does David Wenham in the first second say the U.S. Navy SEAL's kind of weird?
The U.S. Navy SEALs.
He's like, the U.S. Navy SEAL.
I didn't notice.
I'd have to watch it.
He says
I might be going a little
weird.
crazy. Yeah.
But whenever I hit play, I always have that minute where I gotta all right, got my chips here, got my my drink here.
I'll obviously throw in the edit and you tell me if it's kind of
If there's one thing I can see, it's Deadliest Warrior leaving in a gaff or two.
Yeah,
at this point.
that's true.
Let's see if the Americans lose this one. Doubt it.
So I guess I also just want to reiterate real quick, if this is maybe your first episode watching, you didn't watch the other episodes, kind of how we have it set up. I am hosting in the sense that I don't really care about guns that much, and I am obviously flanked by people who care about guns a lot. So that's in military and everything. We have two people, half the panel is in the military at some point. So that's kind of where we're working from right now. So
I kept it short on this one.
yeah, okay.
Same.
We'll see.
We'll see how
I kept it short, just 45 minutes.
yeah.
We get a lot of reused footage in this one. That shot of the Navy SEAL shooting those two guys from the bush, we see 10 times.
Yeah,
Yes.
the camera.
And a lot of it is footage we already saw in the CIA episode too.
Right.
It looks like it was shot on the exact same day.
It's the same desert cloak and dagger kills.
Yeah, and they were okay, take the Mac 10 out of his hand and give him an M4.
Yeah.
And just do the same shot over.
The same alley shots.
Yeah.
Yeah, interestingly, with the you get the IRA Taliban house. It's not the same footage, but it's the same set. Where it's that house, and he shoots people up in the thing, and they go. Let's get into stats. So SEALs established 1961. Force size approximately 2,000. Height 6 foot. Weight 185 pounds. Israeli Commando established 1957. Force size, that's classified. Height 5'10" and 180 pounds.
Yeah, I like that. I'm basically built like a Navy SEAL according to these stats.
Yeah.
Except maybe the muscle to fat ratio a little different. I do like that when the Navy SEAL stats are introduced, David Wenham refers to them as the legendary Navy SEAls. A little biased right out the gate,
Yeah, you already know. Like, I feel like both the Israeli experts already are like, okay, we're just here for the ride. Like, no one expects us to win. We have no chance. But
Well, let me tell you, Matt. You go to Walmart and there's a little 8-year-old kid in there. You think he's buying the Navy SEAL toy or is he buying the Israeli Commando toy? He'll go, who?
yeah,
Why would there be an Israeli Commando
I don't know.
the American Walmart?
Exactly. Who?
If you could find us an Israeli Commando action figure,
yeah.
we'll buy it.
So I'll Google that. So I guess I want to start us out with some background on the SEALs. I'd like you guys to comment on also the popular notion that the SEALs are the ultimate alpha male, if that definition is warranted. Because I think that people look at Navy SEALs like, he's a Navy SEAL. He's like peak masculine. You know what I mean? So can you not only just give us history, but speak to that kind of notion?
I got to interject right here with something that I've just been so excited. I talked about it previously before. There is a second show called Surviving the Cut, which it takes a lot of the American Special Forces and I think a couple foreign ones too. I can't remember.
It's got the same DNA as Deadliest Warrior, I feel.
Well, yeah.
in some
Well, it's
respect.
real footage of like the actual training, and they show you what they go through. And so they have in season 2, episode 1. It's not directly the Navy SEALs, but it is the SWCC, which is the Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewmen, who primarily work with and transport the Navy SEAls. So anyway, they're covering the training for that, and there's this part where they're on these sand dunes. And, these recruits are just physically exhausted, can't even open their eyes. They've been like in the water all day. And they're like, you gotta crab walk. You gotta go down the sand dunes and then crab walk back up. They all crawl down. And there is this one dude, can't even open his eyes. He's so exhausted. He's crab walking up the sand dune. And the instructor's behind him with a megaphone to his head. And he goes, what are you doing, Smith? 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 For like 10 minutes.
What are you doing, Smith? 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 Oh, I know what you're doing. You're going back down to the bomb. Start over. Goodbye.
This guy, miserable, makes his way to the top and he goes, what are you doing, Smith? I know what you're doing. You're going back to the beginning, Smith.
I hope Smith had a great career, but it's fantastic.
Right. But it is like the funniest. I have to show you the clip of it. It is like the funniest thing you'll ever watch.
Yeah, I watched that back in the day. I remember on Netflix, it was, I think I watched all of it.
Another companion piece to this episode, as always, there is weaponology episodes on both the Navy SEAL and the Israeli Commando, which you can find, for free on YouTube if you don't want to pay on Amazon Prime. Lord knows I did not. And I do highly recommend checking those out because I feel like they're almost made by the same producers or something, because it's like you said, Craig, it's like
That's a show with the same DNA.
it's like a Deadliest Warrior Jason show, basically. So
Dan, you want to kick us off with some history?
Yeah, so the history on the show is, reductive as always, but I gotta hand it to them. They didn't really fudge anything up, at least, so that's good. The main takeaway is that the SEALs as we know them today are kind of a product of the Cold War, the changing landscape of warfare in the 20th century and 21st. I guess you could say you're looking at advanced warfare. People decided that they needed a change in the way they look at warfare, especially in the proxy wars like Korea and Vietnam. So it was sort of an evolutionary process. It wasn't like 1961 happened and Kennedy was just like, we need the Navy SEALs.
ouch.
Yes. So it started in World War II, at least for our origin story, with the the frogmen, the original aquatic scuba diving force of the U.S. military. And that sort of evolved from the need of like as I think Craig mentioned, like an amphibious fighter. So as that need arose, they evolved into Vietnam as like jungle warfare fighters. And you see that evolution still carrying out today with like, oh, now we need like a mountainous region fighter for Afghanistan, that kind of thing. The SEALs are mainly meant to be special forces, adaptable to any scenario. And that's what they mainly get off in the show. So they did really good.
Yeah, they actually did like decent information, I think, throughout this entire episode for once. But that is because, did we mention what SEAL stands for? Isn't it like sea, air,
land?
Yeah. So I'm going to get a little bit into the training here.
Why'd you pretend like you didn't know that?
So I'm going to go into the training. All right, so their functions include conducting small unit special operations in jungle, urban, Arctic, mountain, and desert environments, as Dan was saying. Some of the mottos they go by.
Sea, air, land, Arctic, urban.
So some of the mottos they have are: the only easy day was yesterday, pays to be a winner. We'll see if that pans out. And never out of the fight. So their training is famously called BUDS, which is basic underwater demolition SEAL training.
Because it's all about making friends.
Yes,
The BUDS course.
So, and prospective candidates must pass very harsh mental and physical requirements. These include just basic physical requirements: 500-yard swim in 12 minutes 30 seconds, 50 push-ups 2 minutes, 50 sit-ups in 2 minutes also, 10 consecutive pull-ups, and 1.5 mile run in 10 minutes 30 seconds. Now I know what you're saying, you out there. That doesn't sound that hard. That is just the tip of the iceberg, the tip of the Tonto knife, if you will. So,
What are you doing, Smith?
What are you doing, Smith? About 80% of the candidates do not make it through after they pass this initial thing once they start training. Good chunk don't even make it through the first day. So the future training includes 8-week naval recruit training, which is essentially if you aren't done with boot camp yet. 8-week naval special warfare prep school. 3-week BUDS orientation. 24 weeks of BUDS training. That's a lot. 5-week parachute jump school, and 26 weeks of CEO qualification training. Ask me what that is. I don't know, but they do it. Upon completion, they receive the U.S. Navy SEAL Trident, which is the famous designation that they get to wear. So until December 2015, female sailors were barred from becoming Navy SEALs. However, this is no longer in effect. You know I love my female warriors out there.
Isn't the plot of G.I. Jane a lady joining the Navy SEALs?
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah, right. Can't wait to watch it. Yeah, right. So as of July 2021,
Will Smith
G.I.
reference.
Jane joke.
Right.
Throw that gif in here, Craig. Real quick.
So-
Wow.
As of July 2021, Naval Special Warfare Training Program graduated its first woman operator, who would go on to be part of the SWCC that I
Valkyrie.
covered.
Codename Valkyrie, right?
Yeah, from Siege.
Yeah.
But she's part of the SWCC.
Valkyrie's an IS, actually.
So they have been on countless missions, classified and
This guy.
declassified. You can look into some if you would like, and I think I've taken up enough of your time.
So, when was the assassination of bin Laden compared to this episode? I feel like there's...
After.
It was after. So I looked it up. This episode aired in 2010, which means it was probably filmed in 2009. And bin Laden was killed in 2011. Yeah. So, and I had to look up when some of these movies that have come out that have really supplanted the modern image of the Navy SEAL. And of course, all of them came out after the assassination of bin Laden, because that's
Yeah.
when everybody was like, wow, the Navy SEAls, though, like you were talking about, like
I
the new
thought Barack
image.
Obama did it himself.
Right, yes.
Let me be clear.
And that all plays into like what you were saying earlier, how like the SEALs have this like mythical status in America that we could talk about later.
Obama got bin Laden with the candlestick in the in the kitchen, you know.
And then the Lonely Islands went ahead and made a song about it.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, but...
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's not important.
Said that
What are you doing,
Osama is dead. He got shot in the head. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
What are you doing, Craig?
I'll put it in.
What are you doing, Craig?
I'm moving on. Okay. So,
We need a megaphone.
one thing is interesting. Rob, obviously, as you alluded to, says that SEAL stands for sea, air, and land. Isn't that like everything?
They're everywhere.
Everything
behind
except
you.
fire.
That's true. Well, if there's a fire, I guess you got to call a firefighter. So
Call up Scott.
that's their weakness. Yeah. So Matt, what are the Israeli commandos, and can you give us a summary of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
So I'm going to save the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for someone that knows what they're talking about. I researched, the Israeli commandos.
I had a hard time not thinking about recent events while watching the episode, and it was very uncomfortable.
Rest assured, viewers, I'm not going to talk about it at all. Because if you want me to go back all the way to Isaac and Ishmael, we can, but I'm not doing that today. So
The first Israeli commando.
yeah. So on the show, they say Israel is surrounded by enemies, has been at war since its inception. Every child in Israel is born into war. Military service is mandatory. And the commandos, which are over a dozen special forces units within the Israeli military, are sort of like the tip of the spear, the elite of this fighting force. So what is an Israeli commando, and who are they specifically referencing in this episode? Well, much like the Spetsnaz, Spetsnaz just sort of refers to all of Russia's special forces across every branch. That is what Israeli commando is referring to. It's just referring to all Israeli special forces. And it's like a blink and you miss it moment where they're like comprised of over a dozen different units.
Yeah.
Is that why their numbers are classified? Because they're not sure?
Right, yeah. So, it's another episode of taking a specific United States unit, because the American audience knows the difference between a Green Beret and a Navy SEAL,
Right.
but may not know the difference between, the Sayeret Matkal and the Shayatet 13 or something like that. So,
Or Spetsnaz parallels, I like it.
speaking of those two units, I think those two are the ones they're referring to specifically in this episode. So I think more so based on what we see in reenactments, based on the weapons they use and what we're shown, I think they're referencing Sayeret Matkal, which is like sort of the top tier Israeli Special Forces unit. It's modeled after the British SAS.
I thought it was going to be the one with 13 in it, like SEAL Team 6 vibes.
So there is also the Shayatet 13, who are modeled after the Navy SEALs.
Perfect.
They were created based on the Navy SEAls. So
Did you guys know what the numbering scheme of the SEAL teams means? Like, it actually has meaning. It's not just like,
Well,
SEAL
we're-
Team 6.
6 just happened to be the best one.
maybe we'll talk about that
Yeah, we
when
can
we're
get
in the Navy SEAL section,
Okay.
Dan.
Okay.
So
Gotta cram my fun facts.
Israeli commandos, I didn't go too much into their specific training, but I'd rather talk about some of their more famous missions, what they're most known for. So they became worldwide famous for the raid on Entebbe, aka Operation Thunderbolt, where commandos rescued hostages being held at an airport in Uganda. And this is depicted there are many films made about the Entebbe raid. There was one made in 2018 that was just called Entebbe. But at the end of the movie The Last King of Scotland, they show that raid. There was Operation Wrath of God, where Israeli commandos assassinate terrorists in Lebanon who perpetrated the attack on the Munich Olympics. In response to 11 Israeli Olympic athletes killed in a terror attack, the Mossad and the commandos took out multiple members of the PLO and the Black September organization who were behind the attacks. And there's actually a Steven Spielberg movie called Munich that is supposed to depict those operations, which was multiple missions carried out over like 2 decades, basically. And the show also mentions the assassination of Yahya Ayahash. Probably butchered his name, but I'm okay with it. And it did take place, as they portray, using the little RDX Semtex packed into a phone.
I was wondering if there was. I knew there had to be a backstory to that whole thing.
That it did happen that way, and the show mentions it as retaliation for the Munich attacks, although it wasn't for that. This guy was just one of the leaders of Hamas, which is an anti-Israel group. So He was behind a lot of suicide bombings, so I think they just threw him in with the
motive sounds good.
Wrath of God stuff, because
I love the people that just like the historians on Deadliest Warrior spend about half a second researching anything.
Yeah. And I only think they did that because they love referencing other warriors when they talk about warriors, and I know in the GSG9 episode they talk a lot about the Munich Olympics stuff.
Yeah.
That's like the catalyst for the formation of the GSG9. We'll get into more of their history when I talk about some of their weapons, but yeah, they're one of the most highly trained and well-equipped forces in the world. And I think if there's anything unique about this particular episode is that Barry Jacobson, future friend of the show, he just doesn't know it yet. Barry Jacobson talked about when they're coming up with these matches, they're trying to get apples to oranges. They're trying to get warriors that are different because it's more intriguing to see different kinds of warriors fight. This may be the most apples to apples episode of Deadliest Warrior, period. Especially if we're talking about Shayatet 13, which are just the Navy SEALs. Like, that is what they are. Yeah. And so these guys, they use a lot of the same equipment. They train together. They're fighting the same enemies. So I just found that very interesting. There's a lot about Israeli Special Forces out there.
Actually, one more fun fact about the Israeli commandos: they actually take 2 hits.
Right.
Okay.
The fact that they train together too on this show, for some reason, they try to portray it like the Navy SEALs would go over to Israel and they were like the students and the Israeli commandos were like the teachers. Yeah. That's like not the case at all. They like did like cooperative training where they were essentially equals. But you know, if they were the teachers, I'd shoot them.
Yeah, Colin giving the most American response where he goes, "How am I going to beat the teacher? I'll shoot him." It's like, oof, Colin, not reading the room, buddy.
Yeah. So, Jeff, I think this is kind of the stage where they're giving kind of the early takes. I'm sure Jeff was assigned the unfortunate position of trying to be devil's advocate with Navy SEAL.
I love what Jeff says.
Yeah. He says that the commandos have to be prepared anytime, day or night, for battle, whereas SEALs are only deployed for foreign operations. So, I mean, I don't know. I thought it was somewhat of an interesting take. Probably the best thing he could have said, because like you said, these people are so similar.
It is probably the biggest difference between these units is that the Israelis are mostly operating in the Middle East, which is where they live. America's operating in the Middle East. They just happen to be like an ocean away. So,
the commandos get attacked essentially where they live, and I guess he's just getting that like, America has to deploy, but like the SEALs are also like ready to go. There's like a documentary I think called like So Many Hours or whatever, and that's how quickly like you can have boots on ground or something.
We might be going into like sim magic, but I think either Max or the Deadliest Warrior wiki, I don't know which is more credible at this point, but like someone said like the main difference between the two in the end was just like the different environments that the SEALs can operate in versus the commandos.
Yeah.
Is the Deadliest Warrior wiki credible? After the Sun Tzu episode, I'm gonna say no.
Yeah, and on top of the Jeff comment, at some point Dr. Dorian comes on and goes, perhaps this is the closest matchup we've had to date. Dorian Stradamus over here.
Yeah. So let's move on to experts. You know, it's my favorite part of the show. So we got Rob Roy, billed as a 22-year SEAL veteran. I should say, by the way, all of these people are legit, you know, as far as my research goes.
Rob Roy, legend, instant nomination for top expert, right?
Yes. Yeah.
He's pretty sweet. He's
Show legend.
It's hard to get past.
Icon.
Nomination for like most legit dude too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolute sin we never get Rob Roy and Sonny Zekas in the same room, like shooting at each other.
Yeah. So in my research, I don't know if I mentioned 22-year SEAL veteran. He was part of SEAL Team 6 for 10 years. I assume did not kill Osama. But, he voiced, I don't know if this will mean anything to any of you, he voiced War Dog on the SOCOM games.
I saw that too.
Cool.
I got excited about that. I used to play this.
Yeah, he founded SOTG, not to be confused with SODMG, which
Who we beat in Gears of War, by the way.
Yeah.
Stacks on Deck money game.
Xenu Clan took down SODMG. And
Yeah, that's a different podcast.
yeah.
Founded SOTG, which it looks like some type of consulting firm that teaches leadership, team building, etc. And he wrote something called The Navy SEAL Art of War. There is a section in his book, in that book, that actually talks about this episode. There's nothing too juicy. It's just that he said that the shoot was over 2 days and the results were determined with, quote, withering accuracy. So, you know.
Really?
Yeah. So that was basically it for Rob Roy. Colin Palmer, billed as former SEAL explosive expert. And I completely forgot he was in this. Even though he's got more screen time, I think, than Rob Roy. He's just overshadowed for obvious reasons, which we'll get to. Something told me he might be an actor, but he is legit. In his introduction, he actually switches from clean shaven to stubble. Did you guys notice that? No. He like grows a beard like in between shots.
That's how much of a man he is.
Yeah. Yeah. My research, he appears to do some type of consulting similar to Rob. He was a little bit more difficult, where I found a bunch of different people sharing his name. I did see his LinkedIn, and LinkedIn, there's like a dedicated section where you can look at the post people like, which I thought was a little bit weird. And he liked this post of some dude posing with Don Jr. And I was like, it's a little interesting. Then I found a Twitter account of someone with Colin's name, 110 followers, claiming that they were Navy SEAL, and his feed was just all MAGA QAnon stuff, like recent. Now,
All right.
it's tough to tell because the dude with sunglasses on, as most of the MAGA QAnon people do. And I can't really put two and two together, but the LinkedIn, I'm almost positive, was him, and this guy kind of checks out. So he could be ultra MAGA now.
Oh boy.
Ultra MAGA.
So just something to think about. Not a lot of definitive stuff.
I found one little side thing about him that I thought was funny. It was like, I think it's something that he wrote where he was talking. He has like a career in screenwriting now, I guess.
And that's what this guy, the MAGA guy, says he's a screenwriter.
Yeah.
I might be a different guy though.
I don't know, but the Colin Palmer, on like one of his things, he had like a little thing he wrote where he was still open for contracting. I'm assuming he's talking about like mercenary contracting for anti-piracy work. So
Hey,
Better not be symbolic.
He better watch out. We received a pretty detailed YouTube comment about how the pirates have fought and beat the Navy SEALs. So he better be careful.
Are you talking about that type of piracy, or like whenever you guys don't buy the Aftermath and you is it that type of piracy?
Either way, he's coming through your window.
Watch out.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly, don't buy the Aftermath.
So then we get to Modi Hornstein, real name Mordecai Hornstein, is Israeli Special Forces instructor, and it says he's a martial arts world champion. And my research, I found out he fought MMA in the late 90s, so he does have a professional record of 1-6. So I give him credit for stepping in the ring, but
it's not the best.
it's not the best. He was known as the Hebrew Hammer, which is kind of funny. He was born in Israel but fought out of Spring Valley, New York. And an article on Bleacher Report called him, quote, the most dicked-over fighter in UFC history, which I guess, from what I could gather from the article, they argue this because he fought 2 UFC matches. He just got really bad matchups for that, and he could have had a longer career, but he just, it was like a bad match for him. According to his personal website, he served in the Airborne Special Forces and several commando divisions. Because initially I was like, they do that turn of phrase where they say, oh, he trained.
Right.
Yeah, and that could mean anything. But he was a commando, looks like. He now runs an MMA gym in Miami Beach. And given the crossover of Spike and MMA, I'm really surprised this was not brought up.
Yeah.
Maybe they just couldn't fit into the script.
Modi, man, I'm excited.
The Hebrew Hammer.
I got the accelerometers on your wrists. We're gonna have you punching the side of beef. I'm interested to see what's going on, Modi.
You're gonna be studying or sparring with Chuck Liddell.
Yeah.
So
The Iceman.
yeah. Then we get to Mike Kanarik, something like that. Israeli Special Forces veteran. He reminded me of one of the Spetsnaz guys, oddly. He's kind of a standout expert, and he has a storied past.
Really?
So super interesting. He's legit, super legit. And he has like a Metal Gear Solid origin story. So I'm going to attempt to put Metal Gear Solid music over what I'm reading, but this is verbatim what's on his website. So Emil Kanarik, Mike Lee Karanik's future adopted father, was a young teenager growing up in Austria during the dark era of the rise of Hitler. Part of his survival of the Holocaust is credited to a group of nuns who sheltered him in their convent so the Nazis would not capture him and send him to Auschwitz. At the end of this dark era, young Emil decided to journey to Israel and join the Haganah. He later became an officer in the Palmach unit, the strike force unit of the Haganah, what may have literally been the first Israeli Special Forces unit in a partisan formation.
I read all about the Palmach. They were like the original Israeli commandos, basically. Yeah.
You're interrupting my backstory. Sorry. I'll have to pause the music. Okay.
Cut the music. For
I'm enhancing your backstory.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's going to be in the codec entry. That what you just said. So, at the end of his stay at the convent, Emil asked the Mother Superior how he could ever repay them for the sanctuary they had provided in such dark times, when all he had received from them was light during his entire stay. The Mother Superior just answered, "That is a simple question to answer. One day you must save a child like we have saved you, and the circle will be closed." The era of the Holocaust was fading away, and Eastern Europe was healing from the horrific genocide of the Jewish people. The dark cloud migrated to another part of the world, for the cloud of war always lurks upon humanity. After the French left Indonesia, the country claimed its name as Vietnam, but the turmoil between the communist and non-communist leaders had clearly divided the country into North and South. As the conflict between them was heating up, the United States found it necessary to intervene. Some believed it was wrong, some say it was needed. As always, regarding political issues, thousands of lives were changed forever. The clear effect of life-changing ripples occur each and every time a bomb is dropped upon a territory in a foreign nation. On January 14, 1967, an estimated date, a child was born as a result of the American deployment to fight the North Viet Cong in South Vietnam. His name was Lee Van Hong, half American, half Vietnamese. The child was what they called a half-breed. These children, an estimated 22,000, are considered the flower children of the Vietnam War. Nicknamed the Flower Children because of the hippies in the United States protesting the war in Vietnam. Kanarik remembered the words of the nun. To repay the debt to them, he decided to adopt a flower child in the Vietnam War. The adoption process began, and UNICEF, the organization in charge of extracting children from the war zone in South Vietnam, arranged the migration of Lee Van Hong to Brussels, Belgium. 4 children were sent for adoption. 2 did not make it and perished on the voyage from the Far East to Europe. The weakest one that survived was Lee Van Hong. After the child's arrival in Belgium, the UNICEF and Red Cross representatives informed Emil Kanarik and his wife Stella that they would not be able to take the child home. Their main concern was that the child would not survive because of his malnourished condition. UNICEF asked Emil if he would prefer to wait for a healthier child to adopt in a shipment that would follow several weeks later. He declined the offer, and Lee Van Hong, at that point named Michael Karanik, was expedited to the nearest hospital, with Sander close supervision for the next 4 months, not knowing if he would survive. Cholera was only one of the medical concerns among others at this time. However, it seems like divine powers wanted that child to make it.
Divine powers wanted him to be on Deadliest Warrior.
Yeah. And,
Wow.
And the angle, too, is that other child, that's like his liquid snake. Like the other child that didn't die in like that group. So.
Someone call up Colin Palmer. I think we need a screenwriter.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that I sound like a patriot or something, like giving like a.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was good. Yeah. Thank you.
I didn't write that for the. I just copied it from his website. So, another bit that was funny. He was encouraged to learn martial arts as he grew up by his uncle Duty. So
His whole story just went out the window.
Yeah. Who's gonna play Uncle Duty in the screenplay? Might have to rewrite that name. He currently teaches combat in Deerfield Beach, Florida. He has his own like motivational YouTube channel, so check him out. And last thing I'll read here is just his list of achievements. This is on his website. Israeli Special Forces Commando veteran, 6th degree black belt, Joe Louis fighting system, 4th degree black belt, survival hazard, 4th degree black belt, Taekwondo, 1st degree black belt, Krav Maga, certified Muay Thai kickboxing instructor, brown belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, tactical knife fighting champion, Black Belt Magazine's Instructor of the Year 2007, Black Belt Magazine Hall of Fame, instructor to special units in every U.S. military branch, and Deadliest Warrior Season 2 finale, Spike TV.
Yeah.
Do you think Uncle Duty has a brown belt?
Hey, you laugh. I hear when it comes to martial arts, that guy's the shit.
I will like, how great is it this dude?
Enough of this crap.
Right? he counts being an expert on Season 2 finale Deadliest Warrior one of his crowning achievements.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome.
I would.
Yeah, so that's it for Michael, final expert of Season 2. Whew, great way to close this out. The show, is kind of along what Jeff said, that Israel is surrounded by enemies, which is a valid point. That might affect their, But let's get into, before we get to weapons, Matt's Movie Corner.
Yeah. I was about to interrupt like an asshole. I was so happy to get the lead in. So there's a ton of movies. There's a million movies about Israeli commandos, and maybe even more movies about Navy SEALs. Like I mentioned, Munich 2005 by Steven Spielberg. There's another one called The Sword of Gideon, which is another movie about Operation Wrath of God, which is just a cool name. I like saying it. I'm sorry. Then you have Last King of Scotland, I mentioned. You have 2018's Entebbe, and many, many more. Now, the Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
They are the quintessential American war hero, and I feel like even if the movie is not about them, some character just gets a shoehorned backstory of being a Navy SEAL.
At this point, though, if you haven't heard of like Chris Kyle or Marcus Luttrell, are you really an American?
So every freaking movie The Rock is
I was going to
in,
say Dwayne The Rock Johnson, former Navy SEAL, every movie.
They're always like, this guy, ex-Navy SEAL,
He just
Special
got out of the Navy.
Forces.
I feel like The Rock's too big to be like a Navy SEAL. Like, there's
Right.
like a size limit.
That's kind of like what makes it so silly, is like he's the audience image of the Navy SEAL, like just a gigantic hulking guy, but in reality might not make a great Navy SEAL because he's like way too big. Like, the three movies I wanted to mention were Lone Survivor, of course, about Marcus Luttrell, American Sniper, about Chris Kyle, but I think, to me, the definitive contemporary Navy SEAL moment in modern film is the final act of Zero Dark 30, where they depict the assassination of Osama bin Laden. When you watch that, it's like the final 30 minutes, okay? These guys come in, and every military movie and TV show since then has ripped this aesthetic. It is them, and there is in that most recent Modern Warfare game, like the newest one.
Yeah.
They have a whole mission that's just like
Any way you can replicate that scene.
going through the bin Laden compound, and it's ripped like from this movie.
Yeah.
And I think that moment in American history was prevalent to like modern American history, I'd say. And that's what put the Navy SEALs, like, I feel like, on the map for Americans that didn't know about them beforehand. It's what made SEAL Team 6, which is supposed to be like a top secret thing, like a household name.
They are definitely like the most notorious of like
They're notorious.
like name brand recognizable special forces.
When you think about it, the Green Berets typically, like we saw them on the show, they get deployed to do like different kinds of missions. The Navy SEALs get the ugliest and the sexiest job of the military, in that they are like a direct action force. Like, we want you to go from point A to point B, and you either need to kill, rescue, or blow up something. And so it makes for good TV, is what it makes for. And so I think when this movie came out, this movie was a big hit, and you get this dramatization of the bin Laden assassination. Whether that's how it went down or not, obviously nobody really knows except the people that were there. But that is the image that's burned into the popular mind. And so I think that moment and then that movie is what has elevated the Navy SEAL to like be in the modern like cultural zeitgeist as like the alpha male, like the American hero, so to speak, in most movies. So
Doesn't the SEAL...
interestingly enough, as we mentioned, this episode coming out before the Bin Laden assassination, or you better believe there would have been like a scene where they would have been like, I can picture David Wenham just being like, and carried out the assassination of most wanted terrorist in the world, Osama bin Laden. And we would have got a shot of some guy doming.
Probably Fahim Fazli.
Yeah, doming Fahim Fazli dressed as Osama bin Laden.
He's like,
Speaking of movies,
And if that had happened, if this episode had aired post Bin Laden assassination, I just want to point out it wouldn't have been close.
no, it would have been like 999 to 1.
Especially if it had been the year after it had like happened, like filmed a few months after it had been announced, they would have been like, all right, Navy SEAL, 1,000 kills, whoever they're fighting, 0.
what about how would that affect the Israeli Commando stats if it's in the sim?
My sweet summer child.
So this is going to be slightly off topic, but this is something that I was curious about because I was in the Marine Corps. And why is there no movies besides, you know, that awful John Cena movie called The Marine? Why are Marine Corps...
The WWE movie?
Yeah. Why is there no like Marine Corps Special Forces movies? Because we have Force Recon, Marine Raiders, and it is apparently against uniform regulations. You are not allowed to wear a Marine Corps uniform in film. I think they've got away with it a couple of times, like in one of the Godzilla movies, but they had to strip it of all ranks and they had to put like a fake name
I would
on
say
it.
there's plenty of movies where like Marines are in there. Or,
Yeah, but there's no
people
like
are
Force
former
Recon
Marines.
movie, or there's no like big like Marine Raider movie
Au
that I could
contraire.
think of.
By the way, Zero Dark 30 is on Netflix as of recording.
Are you going
this.
to say Active Valor?
No, not Active Valor. I was going to mention much better movie, Den of Thieves, starring Gerard Butler.
Never seen it.
It's not about the military at all, but the 3 thieves in question, Pablo Schreiber and 50 Cent being the other one, are described as former MARSOC Force Recon
Oh,
guys.
nice,
So,
yeah.
yes. So you get a shout out on that.
You have an Israeli movie?
I mentioned a few of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got it.
All right.
I'm ready for some
Yeah,
weapons,
I'm ready
boys.
for the weapons too.
Let's get into the meat of this. So starting off, we got explosives, which I feel like they usually put explosives first. Is that like a trope?
Yeah, I feel like it is, yeah.
They like in season 1 a couple times they were towards the tail end, but then they just started slapping them up front.
It's like the hook, like shit's blown up. So we got the C4 stats are it's a plastic explosive, origin the U.S., detonation velocity 18,000 miles per hour. So I want to ask, in video games, if I shoot a C4, it blows up, and the show says that's not true, how exactly does the blasting cap work?
Well,
Well, if you have
got
danger
the nickname,
close.
you got the nickname wrong though. It's I believe it's a really dangerous stick of butter. It's referred to. Essentially, how a blasting cap works. C4 itself is extremely stable and will not blow up. It has a consistency of like modeling clay, and what that blasting cap does is it is a more volatile, essentially mini explosion that at the right like sends off like the right amount of like shockwave or explosive power, which then blows up the C4. But as we know, C4 will not go off from gunshots. It will not go off from like blunt force impact, and it will not go, as opposed to the CIA versus KGB episode, it will not go off in fire, as that was what was used in the exploding cigar. But it's also known as Composition C, uses RDX as his explosive agent. If you want to look up anything more than that, you can go ahead and get put on a list. That's all the farther I went.
I was about to say, Lucas and I are both on an FBI list now after researching for this episode. And so if we get framed in the news anytime in the future, you heard it here first, folks. That's why.
Yeah.
Apparently C4
Did it for the gram.
unlike Semtex, has a very distinct smell. And some people who are trained can actually smell C4 ahead of time.
Like
That's
a
gotta
dog,
be a perk.
a doggo, right? Can smell C4.
I think so. Yeah, but apparently Semtex is scentless and C4 has a smell. But besides that, it's a, it's regarded as a high explosive because it has, it's a big boom.
When they introduce it, I know we're used to them like faking things right now, and I just like to think that when like he throws Dorian the stick of C4, it's just like a little modeling clay he got from Michaels.
Yeah, well that's in the Semtex.
That's the Semtex.
Yeah.
Okay, same logic though. He still probably
That
got
is
it from a craft
absolutely
store.
molding clay.
Yeah.
We'll
yeah,
cover
that they're showing. Yeah.
So the show talks about in reference, because they're acting out. It's like a Madden moment, like the test, where they talk about whenever the SEALs use C4 to blow up Manuel Noriega's yacht. Shout out Black Ops alum, like Black Ops 2. So in the test, Colin uses a rebreather to go underwater and plant a C4 with a magnetic plate.
That is a LAR V Dregger rebreather that the Navy SEALs use, and is 100% oxygen and filters out carbon dioxide.
That was actually my notes. I just forgot to say it.
Was it?
No. So I just know it's like a scuba suit. Yeah, so then he blows it up. Not too much to say. The show claims that the SEALs look to the commandos for training. Well, you know what? Actually, that's in like kind of a segue section. Anyone have any thoughts on the test?
Yeah. So there was in 1989. They took out the Panamanian leader, Manuel Noriega, I believe they say. What they don't mention is this was called Operation Nifty Package. Which I thought was funny.
Imagine that,
Someone had a good time.
that was probably in the script, and David Wenham like refused to say it. Operation Nifty Package.
Again, the explosion comes out of the top of the boat. Again, they just won't admit that they can't get the real explosives, so it's just like pyrotechnics. But
yeah,
It makes me think of what kind of cheeky names they have now for like C4 operations, like Operation Amazon Prime.
We'll get this mission done in 48 hours or less.
Prime delivery.
So, the thing with the boat, it's weird. They couldn't skimp for a yacht. They got like
they got just like a little.
Joe Spike, we got to call back to this this event's Navy SEAL history.
I'm totally forgetting what the boat looked like in my mind. Was it the little boat that they give the guy in the Somali pirate episode?
Probably.
The shootout?
I'll do it side by side.
We've got this prop. Let's blow it up.
Yeah. So moving on to that segue, the show claims that the SEALs look to the commandos for training. Mike mentions this like a bunch of times in the aftermath, that there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Modi says, "How are you going to beat the teacher?" And Colin says, "How am I going to beat the teacher? I'll shoot him."
Jeez.
Yeah, so there's a joke in there somewhere. And I imagine there's truth to this, that there's a lot of overlap with the special forces. I guess throughout the Western world, I imagine.
I imagine there's truth to this. He probably would just shoot him.
Okay. Yeah. So with that, we'll move on to Semtex. Stats: plastic explosive, origin Czech Republic, detonation velocity 18,790 miles per hour. So very specific.
I didn't know it was Czech.
Yep. According to Deadliest Warrior.
Yeah. So they kind of give it away in the weapons stats that like Semtex,
Right.
They with labeling it with a higher detonation velocity. I noticed that the first time I watched it. I was like, Semtex is going to get the edge. They always give it to the bigger boom.
That's what's going in the computer. So
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So what exactly is detonation velocity, and in what ways is it different than the C4, which Lucas kind of touched on? And they talk a lot about the precision.
I don't know what detonation velocity is. I imagine it's just the amount of like pressure that's.
what do they give it?
Brennan, you got anything on detonation velocity?
Is it just the speed of the shockwave?
Fast the shrapnel's moving.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I just noticed it was bigger, and then after they do the test, Jeff talks about the PSI, and he's like, that the Semtex produces 50 more PSI than the C4, even though the explosions look identical, like on camera.
I think they use the exact same pyrotechnics. They just repeat the same explosion.
Yeah.
They're like,
It had the same
That one's
PSI as the Spartan shield.
And so Semtex is actually made from mostly the same organic compound C4 is made out of, which is called RDX.
yeah, two things that are
yeah.
almost identical from what I picked up.
So, and RDX is like mixed with PTN. I did not look up what that was because I didn't want to get in trouble. And that is used to make Semtex. I will say, unlike C4, Semtex is used commercially around the world as well. It's a very popular explosive for like mining equipment and construction and stuff like that. But obviously used by militaries as well. I would say probably like, is it used by this Israeli Special Forces? Without a doubt, it's probably also used by the Navy SEALs, and I guarantee they both use C4 as well.
Yeah.
Like, so, you know, it is what it is.
It's also how I know that's using modeling clay. I saw that Semtex is normally orange, and the clay that they use is like gray.
Yeah,
So-
I actually made some in my bathtub.
Oh
and,
yeah.
I mean,
is that a siren?
You guys joke about the watch list, but even if you go on the watch list, as we've seen, nothing will happen.
Yeah.
So maybe don't be too worried about that. So do all your research you want.
But if you get the double watch list, then they also don't act.
Don't do anything, yeah.
I saw somewhere that the nickname for Semtex was the terrorist C4. So it's like, okay.
Matt Branding, the CEO of C4 is just like, guys, we gotta do something about this.
yeah, something tells me, I don't know this for certainty, but the vibe I do get is that like Semtex is like a lot more available than C4. C4 seems to be like the more expensive version of it.
Yeah.
I think C4 is made like in a factory by a company,
a bomb
and Semtex
factory.
is like made by a little bit more like
Marketing.
sketchy people sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's it made, Lucas? You want to look that up?
Can it form a pie crust?
Okay, let's move on. So at the start of the test, Mike tosses Jeff a dangerous plastic explosive, which I'm sure he appreciates. And the show talks about the time the commandos used Semtex to kill Hamas's top bomb maker with a bomb, which is kind of ironic. Matt touched on that already.
Betrayed by my own thing.
Yeah, the dude's name was as I said before, Yahya Ayahash, or whatever however you pronounce that. They killed him in
That's right.
They killed him in 1996. And he basically was a leader in Hamas and is credited as advancing the, I don't want to say art. I feel like that's how it was worded
Craft.
where I read it. Yeah, he was dedicated. He helped advance suicide bombing a lot in the Middle East, and
I wouldn't have said craft.
was directly responsible for like the death of over 90 Israeli citizens. So they hunted him down, and they did kill him by putting RDX into a cell phone. And there was like this whole contrived story. Like it was actually, I think there was a Bin Laden involved, one of the famous Bin Laden family. Ever heard of them? Apparently, Ayash was friends with one of the Bin Ladens, and they knew that he used that Bin Laden's phone a lot. And so they took the Bin Laden's phone and put plastic explosive in it. And there was an Israeli helicopter in the air, and they used it to like pick up him talking on the cell phone. And when they confirmed it was him, they detonated it and they killed him with it. So,
So you're like, hello?
yeah. I will note in the show they play a hilarious cell phone dialing
love that.
where he like picks up the phone and it's like, bring.
Oh,
And
I
I
looked
think-
it up. RDX stands for really dangerous explosive. So
And I think the set that he gets blown up at is the Green Beret versus Spetsnaz house.
I think it is
Very
yeah.
similar.
The Taliban house. All right, where are we at? So going on to the test, the show does a test with Semtex and a cell phone and adds other dummies to test the collateral damage. It goes off, the dummy blows up, and the other dummies are unharmed, the collateral damage. Then we get on to a head-to-head test, which is something we always clamor for.
Can I mention that after the cell phone test, Max says, "Let me save you the tour to Shock Patch here." This guy's not tripped.
I missed that. So
Shout out Max. His last episode.
get him in while he can.
Yep.
yeah, front of the show. I can't stress that enough. So
Hello, Max. That was a good joke about the shock patch. Yeah. We'll hang out later.
who's that?
Oh, it was Max. Friend of the show.
From Deadliest Warrior?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's stop this. So, head-to-head test. The show blows up outhouses with a pound of explosive in each house. The C4 test, dummies obliterated. In the Semtex test, the dummies also obliterated, and the PSI is over 50 PSI higher. Not too much to say. And then ultimately give the edge to the Semtex. I believe there's justification is that it's more precise, 50 more PSI. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it is par for the course with this show. They always just give it to the bigger explosive. When watching this, I was like, it's the same thing.
It could have
like,
just been a time.
how
Wait,
much-
could you shove C4 in a cell phone?
Definitely.
Yeah, they're
for sure.
literally the
Yeah.
same thing.
So it's funny because we'll get this with the rest of the weapons. I think there's a really good argument to call every single weapons test even, except for the one that they do on this show. So, that's my opinion. Is I feel like they should have just been called even, but if they absolutely have to give the edge for the sake of a TV show,
What was the
They
only
can
even
give
one
it-
again?
The knife?
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Hand to hand.
they can give it to the one that's like, 50 psi higher or whatever. I don't know how much
Right.
that really matters, though.
It doesn't. You're
That-
still dead either way.
It's like Craig
Nice.
pointed out, the dummy is just absolutely obliterated. But we see that consistently throughout this episode. Like, they'll be like, all the targets are dead and all the hostages are okay. But one guy hit, only missed once and the other guy missed 3 times. So edge goes to this gun.
You know, I can get behind that with this episode, which I was going to get into it later, because both of them were in their actual groups, and that could be representative of the training that the both of them went through.
I'll tell you why I disagree with that when we get
Because
to
they're old
pistols.
now.
Not really, but
But old people are great. Put in that SpongeBob.
Okay, so going on to, I think, what's medium range.
yes,
So the pistols.
or mid range.
I got a little show note here. So at 1735 on Amazon. So commonly when you're watching like training for these special forces, when they're doing like sit-ups and stuff, they'll pour water on their faces or waterboard them while they're working out.
Yeah.
At 1735, there's just a guy standing with one pail of water while a guy's doing push-ups, and they just chuck a pail of water directly into his eyeballs, and he's like, it's like a blink and you miss it moment, but it's hilarious.
That's the kind of elite hardcore training these guys have to go through.
We really are pretty niche when it comes to the stuff that we find in these
Yes.
episodes, where you kind of gotta like.
Oh, it's like I have a parasite growing on my brainstem. Like I have to look for the shit, and
Because what's interesting is like that your brain doesn't notice it, but then you have to like analyze each shot because then you gotta compute if it makes sense or not, and most of the time it doesn't, and you're just being fed slop.
yeah, I'm like a Neo of Deadliest Warrior, where like I just see through the code and notice this stupid shit like that.
It's just one pail of water.
Right.
It's just like, we have seals at home.
It's just like a funny shot.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding that. So Rob says SEALs have the advantage since they specialize in land, sea, and air, versus commandos having specific divisions. Mike says that SEALs start training at 18 while commandos start training much younger during childhood. I mean, just it's like they're trying to list the few differences between these two groups. So what are you gonna do? Not too much to say about that. Let's get to the Glock. So the Glock 19, which I actually think I have shot a Glock before. Shout out.
Yeah.
I don't know whose it was. I think
It was probably
Mike's.
my Glock.
Oh, it probably was.
Yeah, I have a Glock 19. I've shot it
Same.
a lot. Yeah.
My favorite Glock.
I thought you had a 17, Dan.
Nope, 19.
Okay. Hey, welcome to the club.
Yeah.
43 and 43X. X.
X.
Glock 19. Stats: range 55 yards. Ammo 9 by 19 millimeters. He'd say
That's
that?
just 9mm.
Okay, that's
yeah.
what I thought. Mag 15 rounds. Muzzle velocity 1150 FPS. Mike claims that the Glock can fire underwater.
It's the only gun in the world that can fire underwater. Did you know that? It's the only one.
Otherwise, they're just when you go underwater.
Otherwise, it's,
We know
it's
the
jammed.
we know the M4 does not operate under any. It's
Right, yes.
Yeah.
It's jammed. Gun's jammed.
It's his weakness. So, what is the history of the Glock, and how useful would it be underwater?
I didn't research that at all. Glock is one of the most famous firearm companies in the world. They design those polymer pistols, and Glocks are like standard issue handguns for a whole lot of countries. The Israeli so the Israeli military standard issue handgun is the Jericho 941, but I have seen multiple sources specifically that say the special forces often use the Glock 19 or the Glock 17, which is a very similar gun to the Glock 19. I've shot many rounds through it. It's a nice gun. It's a very popular civilian market gun, a popular concealed carry gun. And I can tell you that the biggest difference between these two is that it's way more affordable than anything Sig Sauer makes. Yeah. So that's all I have to say about it until I guess after the tests here.
As far as firing a gun underwater, to answer that, I do not condone this at all, but there's plenty of YouTube videos of people firing guns like in their home pools and stuff. The bullets will only travel like 20 feet maybe underwater before they stop dead.
I remember
it creates a vacuum underwater too.
I remember the Mythbusters episode where they shoot.
Did you kill somebody?
I don't know the answer to that question. It depends. How fast is it coming out at point blank? Because if you were going to, you would have to like be right up next to somebody.
Yeah, like within a foot, because it creates a vacuum in the water, which I know would probably end up killing you, but the water slows it down in like 20 feet.
Theoretically, though, if you put it like up against somebody's head, that would be just like firing it probably on land.
Gas would kill them also, like the release of the gas.
Yeah,
they're dead.
The pressure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You can kill someone underwater with a gun, yes.
But yeah, you can look it up. There's plenty of videos of people firing guns underwater.
It's not the most efficient way. It's not nearly as efficient as shooting somebody out of the water.
Yeah.
So.
I think the thing that like he was trying to get across is like you can stick it underwater and then you're never going to fire it underwater. Yeah. Like you can come out of the water and then still fire it right away, but like most guns you can do that with anyway, so it's not that big of a brag.
Except the AR-15.
Yeah, I think Russia tried to design a round that could like travel through water better, but that's so niche we won't even.
Those Russians, man, they're funny Russians. Experiments.
Yeah. Let's go on to the 6 Sauer P226. I don't think I've ever heard of 6 Sauer before this. I've heard of the P226, but
it's our gun guy here.
Yeah. So, stats: range 55 yards, ammo 9 millimeter, so, and mag 15 round mag. And then muzzle velocity 1200 FPS, which is pretty much exactly the same as the Glock.
Yeah,
it's because it's firing the same round.
I noticed it was the exact same stats, except the Glock had 1150 FPS and SIG had 1200 FPS, which again is like
rounding error.
Yeah, like
maybe if there's like a slight difference in the barrel length, but
is there anything that this pistol's comparable to?
Glock 19. What's interesting, this is actually the correct choice for the Navy SEALs as of filming this episode. So funny enough, the Israeli forces, special forces, also use this gun. They were listed under that. So the P226 was developed by Sig Sauer as the replacement for the M1911 whenever the U.S. government had its big, when they do one of their arms races of what's our next standard issue pistol, and it came in second place behind the M9, and that's why the M9 was like the standard issue gun for a really long time. But the 226, which was a variant of just the 220, was favored by the Navy SEALs for having a slightly shorter barrel. During extensive training, it did not suffer as many performance problems as the M9. As the 226 slide is made of stainless steel for increased strength and was corrosion resistant against salt water, which makes sense for the Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
The chamber and barrel are chrome lined and do not wear in wet or dusty environments, which gave it an advantage. And it was half a pound lighter, which I guess when you're carrying that shit around all day, comes in handy. It could be single or double action, and it became the MK-25 is the military designation for it. Went into service in 1989, and interesting enough, in 2015, Dan, what handgun did you see that the Navy SEALs were adopting?
It was began with a G.
I think it was the Glock 19. And they plan to eventually replace the P226 series with the Glock 19.
Do you guys subscribe to like newsletters that's like, breaking, the new official sponsored gun of the Navy SEAL is the Glock, and you guys are like, holy shit, I gotta tell Matt.
I'm pretty sure, as Matt was saying, because SIG makes very expensive weapons, this isn't so much of a performance thing, it's a budget thing. They want to save money.
Even though the new service rifle for the Army is supposed to be a Sig Sauer gun, which is going to be way more expensive. So who knows?
Hey, you got to cut somewhere to spend somewhere else.
That still has to get through like 30 congressional committees. So, by the time this episode comes out, who the hell knows what's going to happen.
Gotta expend our military people.
Right.
So the test. The goal is to take out the lights in a restaurant and kill all targets without collateral damage. Kind of a unique test of the warrior, not just the weapons. So this is, one of the unique times where we actually get the warriors themselves testing. So I like the idea of like aptitude tests, not just testing weapon to weapon.
I liked that the handguns were tested by 2 military guys during the day instead of Green Beret Spetsnaz, where they have a Spetsnaz and a Green Beret guy test, but like it's at night for some reason. It's because they ran out of like time to shoot, so they were like, just give them night vision.
I really appreciate on this episode where they actually like put some thought into these tests, though. They gave them a little bit of drills to do, because every other Deadliest Warrior test is what? Here's a bunch of shit, just kind of shoot it with the gun and then we'll make up some stats about it.
Yeah, the explosives and the pistols I really liked. The rifle's a little lacking. They do add something to it besides just shooting the target. Yeah. But I do like that they did the little cell phone thing. I liked that they pretended to mount explosives on the bow. I thought that was funny that they made that guy put on dive gear and like swim in the water.
Maybe this is kind of it's kind of unfair in like the Zero Dark 30 context, but I would have loved to see in this episode like the test they use for GSG-9 SWAT.
Yeah,
where they're like going through the doors. Yeah.
Well, what's BS about this test though? So the Navy SEAL has to go first, right? And he does phenomenal. And then they do, Max does his, I got something funny too. I used my speech to text and it's Max Geiger, but it came out Max Gagger. So that's
the porn parody of Deadliest Warrior.
Max Gagger.
So Max Gagger goes, surprise. But the Commando guy was allowed to stand there and he knew the surprise was coming and still did worse. What's up with that?
He didn't do worse. He got never mind.
It was slower.
Were you going to talk about the test, Craig? Or
I was coming up with more Deadliest Warrior porn names of the hosts of the show.
We already had
nothing fully workshopped.
We already had that episode where we listed like 30 porn titles.
Yeah, Matt's mom was watching. We gotta move it on. So, all right. Let's see. We were on
pistol test.
Taking out the lights. They do have an attack bot during the test, break down the door and surprise Colin, but he is unfazed. Colin has great marksmanship. Modi is not as accurate and misses the light several times. And whenever confronted with this, his defense is, we don't think about lights. Okay.
It was pretty funny. So I thought it was funny, like after Colin goes, they ask Modi if he can beat like his accuracy. They're like, you think you could beat that? And Modi, he gives the most confident answer of like, yes, but with the least confident body language I've ever seen. He goes like, it's fun. You'll see it when you watch it. He looks away from them, like a definite tell of just lying, where he's like, yeah, I think I got him. And they're like over here.
So in regards to this matchup on YouTube, I was looking up some other gunfire videos as I normally do. I found a video by the channel VSO Gun Channel. The video was called Sig Sauer P226 Over the Bench, Slayer of the Glock. And no one lies on the internet.
Right.
That's so YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah. My question, so the Edge goes to the 6 hour, I think because of the comparison test. My question was, are these two guns identical? I think we've answered that extensively. So, Edge 6 hour.
Yeah, and they do it just based off of shooting, and clearly, there was some better shooting on one part.
They do it based on Colin shooting. I would add that there's better shooting that were shown. Okay, we know that the show heavily edits things. Colin very well could have missed and they could have edited it out. But Modi got that target. Max goes surprise. It pops through, and when Modi shoots it, it like falls over.
Yeah.
But Attack Bot gets some good action in this episode. I would just say that these are really identical. Once again, I think something you can call even, especially in a test from like this range. Lucas brought up, since it's the two warriors, that looking at their actual accuracies is worthwhile. I agree that it's more worthwhile than it would be normally when they just have random people. I would still say though that it's not like scientific in my opinion. I have no idea, like, does Colin still go practice these guns? Like, has Modi ever shot a Glock 19 actually in his life? Like, there's all these things we do not know about these guys. Like, are both of these sighted in? You have to assume all of this going into it, and so there's so many factors that could be uneven about this whole thing. But if you have to give the edge because it's a TV show and you want it to be dramatic, I guess you can give it to the guy that shoots a little better. I just think as far as the actual weapons go, these guns are so similar for the purposes of what we're shown, like shooting from 20 feet, that I don't know. They both take out all the targets. None of the hostages get hit.
I know that Deadliest War has not done a lot to earn our trust, right? But I think given a situation like this where it is the actual warriors themselves, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume everything they're saying is true.
Yeah.
Or you'll go crazy.
And I actually don't believe that it's not that it's maliciously edited. I just
can't prove it.
Listen, I'm the only guy on the table trying to defend the Commandos here.
Sounds like a losing side.
Yeah, so let's go on to close range. So
Lovely. Love close range on this one.
one of the most entertaining segments.
Can I
this
just
season.
add, instead of pistols, I wish we had gotten some SMGs in this episode.
Yeah.
In fact, I would have liked to drop the knife, keep the pistol, and add an SMG category.
We might get some on this episode. Stay tuned for some facts later.
I actually disagree because one, I think the SMG would have been pretty similar to the long range test, but also I think close range and Krav, I think they want to emphasize the different fighting styles of these people, and like obviously like if they're using a knife versus Krav Maga or CQC or whatever.
I just think the knives are kind of irrelevant. Like, I don't know how many, obviously I'm not a special forces commando out in the field, but I don't know how many kills you're actually getting in a firefight with a fucking knife.
You want to create
with your fold out knife when you have.
Well, let me tell you, 0, because they wouldn't have a fold out knife.
That's what I mean.
To start
All
with.
this whole kit on you, like.
you want to create a reality where the Recon 1 knife test did not happen.
Careful what you wish for.
That's a touche. All right. I just want to mention, they show the Uzi on the Medellin episode, and the MP5 is a really iconic Navy SEAL weapon too. Like, that's shown and everything, and it's a travesty that we never get to see the two of them face off. So, rather see that.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, Craig. Let's get into the knives. Legendary moment on the show.
Okay. So, in the segue, the show claims that the Commandos dressed as Israeli couples and hunted the Munich Olympics killers. Shout out GSG9. So we kind of covered that already. The show claims that close combat is particularly important to these warriors since they're closer to their targets than any other special forces.
Yeah, and the show is super accurate, as we know, always.
So let's get to the K-bar knife. I'm curious. Well, stats: fixed blade, 1 pound weight, 7-inch blade, and made of carbon steel. What does K-bar mean?
Navy SEAL team.
It's your side.
Yeah, but
you didn't do your research.
It's an American knife, though.
I know it's just a brand name. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it necessarily stands for anything. I can find out.
If it does, I don't care. Here's my research for the K-bar. The K-bar is an American knife. Do the Israelis use it? I know that the show says close quarters combat is so important to these guys, but there is no standard issue knife of the Israeli Special Forces, and I imagine it's the same case for the Navy SEALs. It's possible that Israeli commandos would use this knife, but its selection here is pretty arbitrary, especially considering it was invented in the United States and was first adopted by U.S. Armed Forces.
The name origin's worth mentioning.
Oh,
yeah.
what is it?
Yeah, okay. So, according to company records, it was only partially legible K-bar could be read. It was fragments of the phrase "kill a bear," because the knife could be used to kill a bear.
What the fuck?
So K-bar just means kill a bear. There you go.
You're over here.
Yeah.
So then we get the stats for the Recon 1 knife. Stats are it's a fold-out blade, weight 5.6 ounces, 4 inches, and stainless steel. 4-inch blade, I should say.
I got a little upset because it said stainless steel, and like if you know anything about knives, if your blade says stainless steel on it, it means it's like a Target kitchen knife, and I was like, ooh. But I researched, and actually Rob Roy says right after that it's AUS 8 steel, which is actually really high quality. So no worries, people. I just, it bothered me because I had a period of my life where I went on a knife kick and I found out about different steels, and when I heard stainless steel, I was like,
the kitchen knife.
Did they give the Navy SEALs like a Target blade?
Basically.
The U.S. government's like, we spent all our money on the 6 hours, so this knife kit comes with 7 in 1.
All right, let me lay this down for you. There's no verification Navy SEALs using this knife. Why? Because no Special Forces is going to use a folding knife, just for the obvious weakness where it's going to break. They would be issued something along the lines of the Ontario MK3 dive knife, which would be a full tang knife where the metal continues all the way down.
See, that makes sense because it's a dive knife.
Yeah, that's something they would actually be issued. Yeah. No, unless someone brought it from home and carried it to pick their teeth or something. You're never going to use tactically a folding knife in the military. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and
for just obvious reasons. So yeah, I'll wait to get in the test and for the rest.
We do get a hilarious amount of whooshing sound effects during this section of the show. Every time someone swipes a knife, it's like...
I can imagine for the Rob Roy test, putting all the sound effects,
Yeah, right.
I do have a theory that, everyone's like, oh, we only brought 3 weapons. We need one more. And
some guy Israelis like, that knife.
Oh, I'm taking the K-bar. And then the Navy SEAL guy's like, no fair. That's ours. And he's like, oh, I have my Recon 1 with me.
I mean, the Israelis probably do use the K-bar, but some of them probably. But it is weird that it's an American knife, but they give it, I don't know. It's odd.
It's more practical.
Just an odd choice.
It's more practical than a folder.
We get a sorely missed dick joke where Jeff says it's not necessarily size, it's how you use it. And then I think whoever's talking to is like, yep, that's right. Or something. It's been a minute since we had a good dick joke on the show, I feel like.
Yeah.
So in the test, there is a standard ballistic gel slashing test. I should say this is for the K-bar. Michael has a pretty impressive cutting display, and but it's about to be completely overshadowed. So move on to the Recon 1 knife, which I remember watching this clip over and over, sending it to each other, but years before we did this podcast.
Perhaps the most legendary and iconic moment on this show. I mean, maybe more iconic than some of the other stuff we've mentioned.
It's been the highlight on a lot of other YouTube videos popping up lately on the Deadliest Warrior podcast.
Yeah, just hit Rob Roy just going Super Saiyan.
All right, everyone right now, back your chairs up slightly all at once. I want to see your impersonation of it.
Well, I want Craig. I don't want to steal Craig's thunder here.
I just wrote that Rob goes ballistic.
3, 2, 1, cut him off!
There's no other way to describe it.
Everyone all together. 3, 2, 1.
I'm Jeff.
They cut to Max.
That's gonna be fun editing.
They cut to Max's face during that shit, and Max's face is like, bruh. It's like he's horrified.
Max Gagger.
I don't blame him.
Max Gagger.
Max Gagger. And yeah, I mean, Rob Roy just absolutely going to town, and it was because he had the smaller knife and was like, I have to overcompensate for how much smaller this is.
He was like covered in blood afterwards, like the fake blood.
It's like a O.J. Simpson. It's like insane.
Yikes.
So, and Modi can't help but smile during the testing.
Yeah,
because like, how can you not look at that and like imagine being on the set for that.
Yeah, that man is just giving it his all. He breaks the tip off of the knife. They show it afterward. He must have hit.
If you're on Amazon, it is 27 minutes, 25 seconds. Jeff pulls the knife out, and you can see they have a close-up, and it has a broken off tip.
Yeah, and Max drops the notorious line, diffusing all the tension of the scene, where he goes,
I'm guessing they don't let you carve the turkey at Thanksgiving anymore.
Chirp, chirp.
I think that joke is what they've based every single line in all the Avengers movies on.
Yeah.
Because it's anytime something serious happens and Iron Man looks at the camera and goes, that just happened. You know, I'm guessing they don't let you carve the turkey at Thanksgiving.
The world's ending.
Yeah, so that's how do you follow that up? And Jeff says that Rob's stabbing speed is just under that of an Olympic boxer's. I mean, I'm not going to down him, but
they're wearing gloves.
The guy was on SEAL Team 6 for like 10 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe.
Yeah, so the edge they give as even, and I know we have some disagreements here about that. I don't see a difference, but
I mean, I would say this is probably the only weapons we see here where you can like see a analytical difference in them, in that the K-bar is like a longer fixed blade combat knife, whereas a Recon one, like, obviously it can be used to stab somebody like any knife can.
Not military issue.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's not I just think par for the course with Deadliest Warrior is usually giving it to the longer melee weapon. They usually give it to the bigger thing. And the K-bar is substantially bigger than the Recon one. I know it's only 3 inches, but I mean, the fixed blade kind of makes it like look a lot more of a big deal. I would say I'm a little drunk right now.
It's only 3 inches.
All I would say
I got a nice curve.
is of all
Between
the
the
things to
ribs.
call even in this episode, they call the knives even, but I do understand it. I guarantee you they planned to do 2 and 2. They were going to give 2 to the Israelis and 2 to the Navy SEALs, and this was going to be 1 to the Israelis. But Rob Roy's performance overshadows it so much that they're like, we can't. How are we going to look at that footage and give the edge?
So like, does he still have the knife in his hand?
Right. Exactly. So
Went so ham that he literally broke the knife.
yeah. So I personally can't argue with that. Put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, there could be a very good argument to give the K-bar the edge because it's probably the more practical knife, but, you know, not going to go against my own team here.
Yeah.
Well, U.S. Marine Corps, you had a K-bar in the field, right?
We had
Standard issue?
the OKS-3. I forget the name. It's very similar to the Mark III, which is very similar to a K-bar.
The Killabear.
Yeah, it's the one that essentially it has a handle that can also be adapted onto the M16 to be a
Bayonet.
bayonet. Yeah, I forget. It's like OKS-3 something.
You can tape the Recon 1 onto the front of there if you want to.
So let's go on to long range.
It's gonna bug me, so I'm gonna let you know while you're moving on.
Okay. We got the micro glow. Stats: range 200 yards, ammo 5.56, 35 round mag, 650 rounds per minute. Matt, what is this rifle famous for besides being in Black Ops?
OKC-3S knife. I was close.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm practicing my tactical drills like in Zero Dark 30. Clear. All right.
Your siege wiggle.
I see. Yeah. Doing the canting in Siege. Okay. The micro Khalil. Do the commandos use this? So the Israeli special forces, like all special forces, do not have a standard issue firearm. They also use M4s, as well as the much newer TAR-21 or the Tavors, which also show up in Call of Duty. But I don't think it's an inaccurate gun to give them, so I'm not going to harp on it like too much. The Galil is an Israeli-made weapon, and it's got some interesting history, actually. So the Israeli military, when it first came about, just started off using AK-47s because that was the most reliable weapon to use in desert terrain. Also, the Soviets are pouring a ton of AKs out into the world at this time, so relatively cheap to buy. But the Soviets, because the United States sided with Israel in the Cold War, the Soviets started to side with all of Israel's enemies. So Israel decided to make their own weapon that could be self-reliant. So they could be self-reliant in producing it, and that was the Galil. The Galil is very similar to an AK. It looks like an AK. If you notice, the M4 has a 30-round magazine, and the Galil has a 35-round, and that is because it's just an AK's like magazine, but adapted to the smaller 5.56 like cartridge, which is why it can hold more.
To see if Deadliest Warrior was just like fucking up.
It is. It's an interesting little thing that it holds like 5 more. Basically, the Galil was trying to make a more accurate version of an AK, and in a lot of ways they succeeded. It's a popular firearm worldwide. It's still used by some units in Israel today, though it was officially, so it was fielded alongside the M4 in Israel's military for a really long time until I believe it was the 2010s. It was officially replaced by the TAR-21, which is the new age like bullpup. It fires the same cartridge though, so at the end of the day, would the TAR-21 have made a difference against the M4 in this test? I don't really think so. And interestingly enough, now there's actually a lot of rumors going around that the TAR-21 is going to be phased out for M4s again. The Micro Galil was just a version of the Galil that was developed for close quarters, for airborne troops, and for special operations troops. And you know, it's not an inaccurate weapon to give the commandos. I certainly understand giving them a Galil. That's sort of Israel's assault rifle of like the Cold War era, and it's just fine. It's a good weapon. These have, again, very similar stats. I think M4 has a slightly higher rounds per minute. That has a lot to do with actually the reliability, because when you have the looser tolerances of the AK platform that create better reliability, it doesn't fire as fast. And I noticed the range. So Micro Galil is given 200 yards and the M4 is given 550. I didn't fact check the M4's range, but they end up testing this from like 75 feet away. So it's,
if you think about how long 550 yards is for M4,
we fire that in the military though. That is the Marine Corps' longest firing rate. It's 500 yards. We fire like the M4. So I mean, it's
what about an extra 50?
Yeah, we're pushing it. Yeah.
Right. No, like an arrow, you got to arc it in there.
Aim for the clouds.
Yeah, and obviously, while we're on the range thing, because it doesn't get brought up again, they tested from 75 feet, and I've asked this a million times: what distance are we starting at? Like, how relevant is it that the M4 can reach out an extra 350 yards? Because that seems significant. Unless they're not starting like at that distance, because they never test anywhere close to that distance. Even when they test like snipers on here, it's usually from like 80 feet is what like they label it. So
that's such a made up stat.
Yeah,
both of them could probably fire about the same distance. I wonder if that has something to do with their militaries and how far their training exercises fire, if where that stat's based out of.
These are both designed for the same thing. They're both carbine versions of a bigger rifle, and which means they're meant for more close range engagement,
which is what special forces tend to be in.
Exactly.
Which is they don't need, I mean, if they're gonna shoot someone from far away, they're gonna get, you know, like an M14 or something a lot longer. They're not gonna use that for long distance engagement.
Navy SEALs, as you were mentioning, Dan, pretty famous for their DMRs, actually.
Right, yeah. Would it be, I don't know what an Israeli commando would use, but like a Navy SEAL with like an SPR.
There's a DMR variant of the Galil. You know, it's probably something like that, or whatever the American is using is probably the same weapon the Israelis
I was kind of thinking too, can't the Galil, I don't know about a micro, but can it take 7.62 also? Like,
Yeah,
chamber it?
there's versions of it.
It's usually the full size one that does. I
Yeah,
think.
but at least for like the purposes of Deadliest
and that's-
Warrior, maybe that can make it more.
That's not the AK 7.62. That's the NATO 7.62.
Yeah, which
the
is 308.
Yeah. So that's all I had to say about it, Craig.
Okay, cool. So let's get to we touched a little bit on the Colt Commando in your guys' discussion.
Yeah, lead me into it.
Range 550 yards, which is actually about what like Marines usually train at, about the maximum distance they aim for. Ammo 5.56.
Where'd you learn that?
Did my research. 30 round mag, 750 rounds per minute. Obviously, I want some background, but what actually does Colt Commando mean?
Sure. So I'm not going to get into this too much because we've seen very similar weapons such as the M4A1 and AR-15 on the show. The Colt Commando is based off of the CAR-15 family, which is just Colt. They stuck with the Armalite name, even though it's not the same company, but they just threw their own C in front of it. So it's by the parent company Colt is the difference.
The Commando is a gun in Black Ops 1.
I think it's the first gun you get.
It's the M4 with the sling wrapped around it.
Someone told me the sling isn't what made it. Colt
Right,
Commando.
yeah.
So the Colt Commando itself, its model designation is XM177. So this variant was designed in 1966 in response to the U.S. military's desire for a compact M16 variant. And they actually stopped producing them in 1970. So why is that important? Because it was in service from 1966 to 1998. So this is slightly out of date.
It gets replaced
time frame.
by the M4, like
It
the
does.
M4A1. Yeah.
So the choice of this weapon for this episode is slightly out of date. So Colt actually considers this gun a submachine gun. So there you go, you got one.
I did get one.
But the stock picture they use in the episode is just a regular M4.
Yes.
They don't show the right gun. They were commonly equipped with a larger flash hider to compensate for shorter barrel length. And I'm sure Rob knows exactly what he's talking about. He's probably way more experienced than me. But the more realistic fire rate I could find was 950 rounds per minute. But he could know something I don't. He's the SEAL. I'm not. So what is a more appropriate rifle for the SEALs during this time period? As Matt said, the M4A1, the MK13 CQBR, the MK16 SCAR L, and the MK17 SCAR H, my favorite.
This is a real one, too. We ponied up the Dr. Squatch money. We've been saving it. And we bought a real $4,000 SCAR H.
Why is the tip on the SCAR H orange?
So that's actually part of the flat dark earth design, Lucas, if you want to take it from here.
So fun fact for everyone out there, this is yet another airsoft replica that we have on the set. One of us may own a real SCAR, don't know who. But they would also use, as I mentioned earlier, the M14 EBR. So
I wanted to see that gun on this fucking episode.
that would have been a lot cooler.
I really wanted Lucas to bring in his SCAR, but it would be
Allegedly.
fucking,
We try to do no real guns on this.
Yeah,
it would turn into rust very quickly.
Yeah,
And I'm not talking about the Call of Duty map. Let's just say that.
100% fake.
Yeah, so Max, we get a funny moment. He tries to flex his gun knowledge on Rob, and he asks,
All right, and what's the cyclic rate on the gun?
This is anywhere from like 450 to about 750.
Whoa.
what is the cyclical rate on that gun? And when Rob answers, he pretends to be surprised. He goes, whoa. It's like it's like when you're talking to the car mechanic and you're like one thing and you're like, oh, is it like the alternator? And he's like, no. Oh, wow. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
it's like that type of interaction. So
Well, that's what he says, 450 to like 750 rounds per minute, which is a pretty wide margin.
It is a wide margin.
And I think he undersells it a little bit.
what is the cyclical rate?
How fast it like.
So
Is that different than the like the fire rate, like 750 rounds per minute?
I think it's meant to be the same thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's I
the
think
rate
he's
of
just saying
fire.
how fast
Your
the
way of
bolt
saying
cycles.
RPM.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like,
As to the time thing, the Colt Commando being a little like out of
Imagine
time.
the glow is probably a little out of date.
I think that's the reason maybe they use it so they can use like a Galil in comparison, even though the The Galil would have been appropriate, but the Micro Galil is a pretty modern, actually, invention.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the Colt Commando is a submachine gun, as we know.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
So
it's better.
So
That was off Colt's website.
what I was trying to say was, if they were doing full modern, they could have done M4A1 versus like the Tavor. But fun fact, in the Green Beret episode, they used the M4A1, and I wanted them to use the Car 15 so that it would be a Cold War matchup. But, you know.
Can't get what we want.
Yeah, we can't always get what we want.
If only
But
you were the
try
producer.
sometimes.
Yeah, one of these days we remake the matchup and make the show. So
They still fire the same exact cartridge and are pretty similar, like, in their function.
We're
at
still
the
going
end
to
of the
fix
day.
it when we're
Yeah.
rich.
Right.
gotta manifest that. It might be a little bit hard to manifest in the Max Geiger interview. But okay. So in the test, the shooter must target a tactical pig and avoid civilian casualties. In the Colt Commando, the exit wounds are particularly harsh, and they repeat the test with the Galil, and it's similar, but I don't think the exit wounds are as bad. I think they talk about, I think you mentioned on a previous episode, Matt, the like the canoeing that happens sometimes if you shoot someone in the head. I think it's sort of what they were getting at in terms of like the exit velocity.
That's like a trademark Navy SEAL thing.
Yeah.
They talk about canoeing. Supposedly, there's like 3 different guys that have come out to claim they were the guy that killed bin Laden, but supposedly the guy that shot bin Laden canoed him after he was dead, like shot him in the head on the ground, and people were very upset because it's like, asshole, we're trying to identify this body, but apparently he was so overcome with emotion. Who knows if that guy's just lying or not? But anyways,
he has a book deal now.
I think he's founded like a beer company that should sponsor us.
Well, I don't. For the record, the guy that founded
Any
the beer,
company really will sponsor.
the guy that founded the beer company, I don't know if it's the same guy that I'm talking.
Pretty
about,
sure they
so.
settled on a guy who actually did it though, because he's always on like CNN and shit.
Did they?
As like a correspondent.
Do you think there's like a different one for CNN and a different one for Fox?
Ooh, deep.
There's like a based one.
The plot
like,
thickens.
Yeah, because you know, like after like they killed bin Laden, I did. That was my. No, that was me. That was.
Yeah.
I got him.
No, I did the war crime.
Hey, bin Laden kind of had it coming.
No,
man.
sure, but
I would
I
say
broke the dam.
bin Laden, a man to never shy away from war crimes himself. As far as the exit wounds go, they do a very similar thing with the M4, which fires the same round, where Matt Anderson, you will remember, empties into a ballistic gel and then pulls out his binoculars to look at it.
Yeah.
Dorian does the same thing where he's like, and it's actually the exit wounds on this on these bullets, although it is kind of a lot more visceral looking with the pig than it is with the ballistic
He
gel.
went back
I
there
will
with his
say.
Recon 1. He was like,
Yeah,
carving them out.
the Galil fires the same rounds. I think what ends up happening is, I can't remember if they say how many rounds Rob hits, but I think it's all 30.
Yeah, they said if not all 30, like at least like like 99% of them.
Mike, I think hits 21
of 35
out of 35,
which is what they
into
based the
pig.
edge off of.
Yeah,
honestly, I will say that Rob's grouping is like
pretty good.
Pretty on that. Yeah, it's like in a nice circle right where you want it.
Because 75 feet is not that far for a rifle. However, these guys are shooting standing up,
and it's moving too.
Shooting standing is substantially harder than shooting from like prone or kneeling. Like having to shoot for the purposes of like grouping accurately, I mean, shooting standing is a lot more difficult. So good on Rob, man.
Yeah, honestly, like
that's part of why they give the Commando the edge is because of Rob's grouping.
Yeah, it looks. I mean, it's a really good grouping. I mean, you think that target is moving also, and there's also dead zones with like, you know, where you can't shoot because there's a bystander in the way. He does. I was like really impressed with his shooting on that test.
Couple funny moments. We do get a deploy tac box from Jeff, and after Mike finishes shooting, they say nice work or something like that, and he goes, thank you, sir. He like yells it.
He shoots it and the blood bag like falls out of the pig. You can visibly see one of the blood bags.
And they're like, oh.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe Mike didn't have his hearing protection in all the way, and so like he can't hear, and that's why he yells, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, like PTSD flashback. So yeah, Edge Commando. Not too much to say.
I agree.
Like most of these weapons.
I mean, I don't disagree with it. Again, I think they're pretty similar. You could call it even. I really feel like the difference is going to be who's wielding the gun rather than like the rifle itself.
Right.
Especially from 75 feet.
Right. So the X Factor, interestingly, rather than giving them like an actual X Factor that means nothing, this might mean nothing also, but they talk about the hand-to-hand combat. So the Commando brings Krav Maga. I guess Krav Maga doesn't get any kills, so who cares? But anything interesting you tell us about Krav Maga, Dan, as a black belt?
Not quite.
Yeah, you're the Navy SEAL guy, but you did 2 years of Krav Maga, right?
I did. Stopped during COVID, which I need to get back into, but I mean,
there was no move against that.
So on day one, I actually elbowed a guy's nose into his skull.
You signed the waiver.
Dan's referencing Modi in this scene where he's showing off the Krav Maga move to Mike. All he's doing is like he's showing off a move where like he parries a punch and hits an elbow into Mike's like chin, and he goes, "So this would break the jaw," and I'm like, "Yeah, it probably would," and then he goes, "It would also push the nose into the back of the skull and kill this man or something," and I'm like, that might be. Maybe if you're like Goku.
They do actually represent Krav Maga pretty well though, as like the whole point of the martial art Krav Maga is to just use like maximum controlled aggression to just end the fight immediately. Yeah. So it's using like any part of your body for a weak point just to make sure that anyone of any size can at least have a fighting chance against any opponent.
Yeah. So don't the Spartans also use that? Krav Maga?
No,
Not
Sistema.
Oh,
Russian
okay.
Sistema.
Which is probably borrowing very similar ideas.
So Krav Maga is Israeli?
Yeah. It's like Israeli domestic.
I think it means it literally translates to like fight contact or something like that. And I forget.
I could Google it real quick.
I forget like what that means in their language, but the literal interpretation to English is like contact fight or something like that.
Shout out to the Krav Maga agents.
Good defense.
Yeah, hero escape. Oh geez. Yeah, so
I was saving that one. Probably could have incorporated it better.
I actually wrote the exact quote. The chin will break and the nose will go into the back of the head and he will die. So I'm just imagining like the guy's nose like just
yeah. Well, I mean, people say that. Like, you see YouTube videos of like the legendary death blow, like where you take your palm and like go like that to somebody's. The reflex skills. But I don't know if that's real or not.
Yeah.
Doran could tell us.
I will say there are some like Krav Maga moves or even just like sparring practicing, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. And the SEALs had CQD. Shout out to the boss, another Metal Gear Solid.
You and the references today.
I know, I'm going crazy. Real quick aside, I always thought it was funny in Metal Gear Solid 3 when they say that the boss created CQC, which is close quarters combat. Like nobody fought at close range before the boss.
They all just stared.
They all just like, I'll be over there someday. The boss was the first person to be like, all right, that's enough.
Foxhound.
Yeah, okay. Anyway,
what if I punch him?
CQD was described as operationally focused training system that seamlessly integrates all aspects of tactical skills, from unarmed to armed, even though they say that you can't use your gun on the show. Of the individual and team. It relies on core tenets, the most critical of which is teaching participants to control their emotions and reactions under extreme stress. Most moves, as most of them other forms of martial arts, they rely on kinetic and physics, and helps you create muscle memory and mentally know when to dial it up or dial it down, and to install a critical edge in you. That was directly off like the website of this.
That means absolutely nothing.
Yeah. So there are a few martial art programs that are staple in the Navy SEALs, and they've been described more as like MMA, where they mix up a bunch of different styles of martial arts. Essentially, any branch, anytime you're in anything in the military, you're going to learn some form of like martial arts, and it's going to be a mixture of like a lot of different things. Like the Marine Corps had like McMap. And like, you know, the Army has their stuff. And you learn
McMap.
Marine Corps martial arts program.
Okay, I was going to say, is that the Irish version of MAP?
Yeah, McMab.
It's like for the month of July, join McMap only $3.99.
For the sake of X factor, we're just gonna say both of these guys are probably pretty trained in hand-to-hand combat.
And
It'd be nice if it played more of an actual factor in the sim.
they talk about this again. So they talk about it in Green Beret, Spetsnaz, and they talk about it again in season 3 with North Korea and Rangers. And I actually find the martial arts stuff really fascinating. I kind of wish, like, I still wish they would drop the knives and just like talk about something like this. Really, I think this stuff is a lot cooler to learn about and to see demonstrated by these guys than like. Because at the end of the day, you could stab somebody with any fucking knife.
Yeah, it would be cool to get like a
even a
10-minute demonstration or something for something like that.
That's exactly what I said for Green Beret versus Spetsnaz. Have them like spar. I know it'd be a little bit goofy, but
Because to me, unlike a sword where you can take 2 different swords and really like be like, okay, which of these is a better design for this scenario? Knives at the end of the day are unless you're getting an outlier like a Bowie knife or something, they're all so similar that it is hard to like say one is clearly definitively better than the other. Whereas this martial arts stuff, again, it might be hard to judge which is better, but I think it's a lot more fascinating to see.
Yeah.
Especially like that North Korean episode, you get like the North Korean Hapkido stuff against like the Rangers like idea where they're utilizing their weapon or whatever. They're trained to utilize like their rifle in hand to hand. And I think it's a cool, like philosophical, actual solid difference between these fighters rather than just like, well, I have a bigger knife, you know, that I was arbitrarily given for the episode, basically. Yeah. But there's no kill stats for it in the sim, so I guess it's not put in at all, and it's wasting all of our times.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, they slap it in as like
almost
an afterthought.
Because we're either the X factor is just here's this interesting thing we found about this warrior. We cannot factor it into the sim.
Right, yeah.
So that sucks, but all right. Well, now it's time for Lucas's favorite part.
Oh
the
boy.
sim.
Everybody at home, stop what you're doing and hit your enter keys right now.
Oh man. Oh boy. Oh man. Oh boy. Oh man. Oh boy.
Last sim of season 2.
It's that time again, ladies and gentlemen. Join us down the question-filled rabbit hole that is the Deadliest Warrior
He
sim.
actually wrote, "Oh man, oh boy,"
like 3 times.
Lucas heavily scripts these.
Oh, I love writing these. A program so sophisticated, yet so simple, it almost laughs at you for questioning it. Boys, it's been an honor doing this podcast for season 2 with you. Can't wait for season 3. But for now, make sure your straps are tight. Sit back. Hang on, because once that light goes green, we're going to war, dog. Bloop. Go, go, go! Let's do this.
That's my night vision turning on.
So, we open up on 5 Navy SEALs sneaking up on what looks like an oil rig factory thing from every video game ever. The Israeli commandos are posted up. I guess they're the defending squad. Remember, there's no respawns in this one, though.
Hardcore.
The SEALs post up, start moving in. One of the commandos is on patrol, a little too close to the edge. A SEAL sees him, guns him down for the first kill of the match. Shit's about to hit the fan, just like when I have Chipotle at the indoor skydiving place. Anyways, the commandos know something is up and open fire on the SEALs as they move inside a weird shipping container door looking thing. They both sneak into this random underground tunnel. The SEALs keep pushing forward in a pretty untactical way while the commandos lay a piece of Semtex near a doorway. The commandos take position while the SEALs again very untactically just kind of bust through the door. Gets blown up. That other SEAL that came through the door is also injured and gets gunned down by the commandos. That's 2 deaths right there. I'd like to remind you that these are the good guys fighting the good guys right now. The remaining 3 SEALs go back out the same way they came in, realizing, well, that might not have been a good idea. The lead SEAL spots a commando coming down the stairs, guns him down. 3v3. We get into a firefight with pretty much no one hiding behind cover for some reason. This causes SEAL 2 to get shot and lose another member. At least you think so. But his buddies come in, take him out of the hot zone. Wait, never mind, he's dead anyway. It was all for nothing. SEALs move into another building. The commandos follow right into that building through a different exit so they can get into another engagement, I presume. We get into this giant generator room. One of the commandos gives a forward hand signal so that you remember these are special forces we're dealing with. SEALs move forward. One of the commandos has a shot, but forgot to load his weapon. You know, to remind you that these are special forces we're dealing with. We get into a sideways running gunfight. One of the SEALs turns, shoots a bullet right through the commando's head. The SEAL in the back moves out of cover to catch up with his buddy. Is attacked by the least stealthy surprise attack I've ever seen.
It's like climbing up on it.
Quick.
I was like, he's like an enemy NPC. Like, how does he not see him?
Must have been the wind.
Arrow sticking out of his head.
Quick hand-to-hand combat. We get a kill from the K-bar. Literally, the first kill that was not from one of their primary weapons.
Straight up, that was a brutal scene.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a kind
He's
of...
like crapping on him.
Yeah, like usually these scenes are played for laughs mostly, and that one was like, he like looks into that man's eyes.
Yeah.
He like looks into a man, and a man who's in his 20s looks into his eyes and just extinguishes his life. And
doesn't
it's
he like tap
he
him on
pats
the
his
head?
helmet.
Yeah, pats
like,
his helmet at the end. Like
that's dark.
Yeah, like...
He'll get his comeuppance.
So, commandos meet up to chase back the one SEAL that is still just running off by himself for some reason. Leroy Jenkins, I like to think. He literally abandoned all of his teammates multiple times just to run off on his own.
Sounds like someone I know when I play Siege.
Hey. Special forces.
When Dan plays Siege, he either gets every kill that round or he dies in the first 10 seconds and has to spectate as we slowly lose.
I play a high-risk game.
So he plants a C4 explosive behind a pole. You know, they got to show the SIG Pete 226 finally, so he shoots the pole to call the commandos over to it. Son of a bitch. Both of them get right in position. Hits the detonator. We get a big boom that takes out both commandos.
Kaboom.
The SEAL looks over him with his handgun drawn for confirmation. All of his teammates died, but at least he got the dub.
Kaboom.
Winner, Navy SEAls.
Kind of an anticlimactic ending that just takes off
both of them
2 for 1. Yeah.
Someone call him Mark Wahlberg because he's the lone survivor.
Yeah, I do agree, a little anticlimactic. I do want to point out we do get that hilariously bad guy dying sound effect that we love.
Yeah.
We do get one of them.
It was
all the bad.
Shortly after the Semtex explosion, the guy that gets shot on the ground does it, I think. He's like,
Yeah.
Not the most funny or exciting sim we've had.
Yeah.
I tried to spice it up some.
Just the fact that all the kills were either C4 main weapons or in one case a knife. It was just really underwhelming.
You always bring the heat.
Did we even see the Glock at all?
No.
Did anyone even pull out a Glock?
Well, I thought this was the one. The other one was the one sim where you don't see all the weapons. Do you think? I mean, maybe you physically see a Glock, but I don't remember.
Maybe it's like on the side or something.
That's a good point, Craig. Maybe this is one. I don't know.
Well, let's go to the kills. So Navy SEAL C4 47 kills, M4 355, P226 101, and the Recon One Knife gets 15 for a total of 518. Israeli Commandos, Semtex gets 54, Galil 288, Glock 19 gets 98, K-Bar gets 42, for a total of 482 kills. Matt, hit us up for the comparison in terms of closeness.
This is the closest matchup in all of season 1 or 2. Beating out IRA versus Taliban by 1 kill.
Dang.
So, is it rigged? I don't know. But they do seem to push this narrative consistently throughout the episode. And I think you can hear it in our analysis of the episode too when we talk about the weapons, just how even all of this stuff is.
I think Max says that IRA Taliban is closer, but I think he might be mistaken.
He is mistaken according to my records. So
the keeper of the kills.
The keeper of the kills. It is by 1 kill. I believe this is the closest. I will double check for the sake of Max. Anybody else, you know, I'd be like, get out of here. But because it's Max,
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show. Nope. Oh, wow. Max may be correct, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh,
I'm sorry I ever doubted you, Max. IRA versus Taliban is closer, 517 to 483, whereas this is
518
to 482.
So still by one, but just in the reverse.
Yeah,
They don't
sorry,
call Max Geiger for nothing.
I am once again humbled by the legendary Max Geiger, so my bad. I'm glad we cleared that up, though.
Like that the recon knife only got, 15 kills? But I like to think that every single one of them was like a Rob Roy stab fest.
Just to give you the full stats, so Semtex 54, C4 47, that's a difference of 7 kills. The difference between the M4 and the Galil is 67 kills. Difference between the pistols is 3. The difference between the knives is 27. So at the end of the day, the knives had a big in favor of the Commandos, but the rifles had an even bigger in favor of the Navy SEALs. Right. So that's sort of what carried the day for them.
I don't hate these results, honestly.
No. Yeah.
They're some of the most easily digestible results that we've got in a while.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And there's nothing on here that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, the sim reenactment was kind of underwhelming, but if there was ever going to be a close matchup, Israeli Commando Navy SEAL could probably take it.
It was, it ends up being pretty much like good guy versus good guy. So they're like, oh, let's keep this one close.
I think I was thinking of how this is a little fishy, to be honest with you. So Spetsnaz Green Beret is 519 to 481. Navy SEAL Israeli Commando is 518 to 482. And IRA Taliban is 517 to 483.
What's pirate versus knight?
All three of those are 1 kill difference.
Yeah, that's kind of fishy.
Smells a little fishy, and obviously modern matchups like this where both of them have assault rifles and similar training should be close, but it is a little fishy that they're all within 1 kill of each other.
And also, these are the sims where it doesn't make any sense that there's only be 1,000 kills. So
exactly.
More evidence that they probably just it's close.
Made these ones up. Yeah. Because there's only... All right, now I'm having a panic attack on set here. There's 1 kill difference between all 3 of these matchups.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Season finale, and we're on to something big.
Yeah. that it's fake. Well, we're not realizing. So,
but Edge won SummerSlam. He's the champ.
So, in the interpretation of the results, Jeff says that the Israeli commandos didn't bring enough, quote, long-range weapons to the game.
What?
Motherfucker, you picked the weapons. It's like that meme of the Subway sandwich where it's people say Subway sucks.
My brother in Christ, you made the sandwich.
Yeah, it's like that. Same thing. What do you mean not enough long-range weapons?
Yeah.
They didn't have one of each? I mean, maybe we just turn a phrase. I don't want to razz them too hard, but... So
we still got to get him on here. So
no, but in truth, I think he was trying to. That was a turn of phrase. And this, I was trying to see. There was a guy who looked like Michael Lair. He wasn't, but I was trying to find him in the credits. And interestingly, they list the experts as, quote, historical experts, which I'd be curious. These people I get because they're the actual commandos, but do you think they call any of the stunt actors historical experts just so they can be credited, or do you think they change it?
Who knows? Yeah. Do they even know?
I know I'm getting kind of granular here, but so let's get into the aftermath, then we'll get into final thoughts. I really don't have too many notes. The panel is Rob, Roy, Michael, and Max. Both sides are cordial, although there was a moment where Rob and Michael were joking about instead of 2 allies fighting, they put both squads against a terrorist group. In my head, I was like, yeah, they never have a terrorist group on the show. And I was like, yeah. A commenter asked Rob if he had an advantage because he had a sight. Because in the Colt Commando, there is a sight on the gun versus the Galil, that's just an iron sight. Rob says that it was red dot, not telescopic, and insists it's the operator, not the equipment. And then Mike, interestingly, says that the Galil was a bad choice since it's a micro and it's not as accurate. And the Commandos also use M4s. So he was like, he had a micro Galil versus, more of an SMG.
Although you could have given both warriors an M4 and it would have been an even more boring episode.
Yeah, right, yeah. They just gave him they do what they do with special forces. They gave him the carbine version of the bigger rifle,
and they gave him something a little more interesting than just the M4.
Yeah, and I think the Galil is cool and unique to have on the show, so
yeah,
I think it's fine.
Yeah, and then what else do I have here? A commenter says for the season 2 Back for Blood, it should be Spetsnaz versus Navy SEAL. Can't disagree with the commenter, but
right. I have a note about that in my final thoughts.
Okay. Kyrian says that Barry Jacobson was intimidated by Sonny, which that was an interesting fun fact. Kyrian asks Max who he'd like to see on Back for Blood season 2, and Max says Attila versus Attila versus Comanche, and then Kyrian fucks up the final sign off of the Aftermath season 2, which is
nice,
nice Kyrian.
Did you notice there was a adopt a minefield on this one too?
Yep.
Yeah.
I wonder why. Maybe just to be nice.
Yeah, just because I don't know.
Maybe it felt awkward too.
Maybe because people don't get killed by swords that much anymore, but people get killed by guns, I guess.
Probably because they featured explosives.
Yeah.
Should have been Adopt a Gun.
Whatever. Guys, this
Adopt a gun field.
This is a Spike TV show. Plant your flag elsewhere, all right? This is all for funsies.
Yeah, I did have actually Rob Roy's final thoughts, but they're not loading, and I'll be honest, they weren't that exciting. They're just kind of
Was he I agree?
Yeah. In his book, he writes, he's like, well, we use better decision making, and we're ready for the moment. And it's like, dude, this is all fake.
Right.
So
none of that goes into the computer.
Yeah. So I'm not totally upset that it's not
they
loading.
just took Green Beret Spetsnaz at -1 kill to get this result.
What a conspiracy!
And you know what?
I know, right?
And what's it called? I think IRA Taliban. The kills don't add up, so someone just fucked up the map.
It's IRA Spetsnaz. They don't add up.
Yeah.
They do add up in IRA Taliban, but yeah, it kind of crazy. And I did not bother to go back and look how the M4 in this episode stacks up against the M4A1 in Green Beret, but I can look that up real quick while we're doing final thoughts. So
yeah. So I guess before we get into our actual final thoughts, do you guys think this episode is military propaganda? Which, not that a lot of younger people weren't alive at the time, but this type of episode or this type of show was prevalent all through Spike TV, and if you were our age, you couldn't avoid this type of. Do you think that there's that edge to it?
And I mean, this was peak Modern Warfare 2 time period too. So that is the epitome of military propaganda.
Yeah, I think it was also that was such a big trend at that time too.
Oh my God! So propaganda question aside. So the Green Berets M4 gets 311. Navy SEALs M4 gets 355. Now, mind you, there are shotguns in this episode too, so that's probably taking some of the kills. The Israeli Galil gets 288 kills. The Spetsnaz AK-74 gets 288 kills.
Oh boy.
I am cracking the code.
I'm hacking it.
Right, yeah, hacking in progress. Very, very interesting.
Do you think that they used these are all assault rifles, right?
I think what they did, Craig, was take the results from Spetsnaz at Green Beret and -1 on one side and then flip it.
That's better. Okay.
Matt, if you keep going, you're gonna wake up in a vat like Neo in the real world.
And I'll be like, damn, this place sucks.
Yeah.
As far as the military propaganda, I mean, as far as any movie or video game probably is, Call of Duty is military propaganda. All of those war movies I mentioned earlier are all military propaganda to a degree. It is what it is. Propaganda.
As a teenager, I still ate this shit up.
Yeah, exactly. I think as far as what's affecting the youth, Deadliest Warrior is probably not the top culprit or whatever.
I mean, and apparently it's 50% effective.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Did the Navy SEALs win? Yes. Did I join the Navy 5 years later? Yes.
Yeah.
That just means it's good propaganda.
Yeah, so why don't we get into final
vegetables,
final thoughts? I guess as our guest, would you like to go first, Dan?
So I thought
I'm fucking reeling over here. I'm sorry. I have to look at IRA Taliban. Sorry, Dan.
We'll let Matt simmer a little bit.
Yeah.
This episode, as a capstone for season 2 is a fantastic idea. Like, I was so hyped for Navy SEAL, like seeing it as a teenager, but there were some like underwhelming aspects to it. The episode is full length. The 40 minutes goes by like nothing.
It does,
and
yeah.
that's really, for me, it was because the explosive tests were basically the same. Pistol tests, they were really cool in how they like framed it, but also pretty much the same. Like the assault rifles, you could pretty much argue the same. The knife for Rob Roy is really the only standout thing of the episode, and I know that's kind of critical, but for me, I thought they could have done better, but it's still a really great episode in hindsight to look back on.
Cool.
Nice.
Lucas, agree?
Yeah, I would like to officially close out season 2. Close the laptop. Fun episode. There definitely could have been a worse episode to close out on for this season. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. Good matchup. I'm happy with the results, that they're close. I think it's 2 good warriors. You know, we got a little bit of mix up on the weapons, something a little bit that you wouldn't expect. You know, the Galil was a little bit more interesting. The Colt Commando is a little more interesting than just slapping up like the M4.
Twice.
Yeah, another time. I think the highlight of this episode is honestly the experts. We get to see some fantastic shooting, some actual, you know, a little bit of like how they actually would operate. You know, we get some of the best experts of season 2 right here for legitness. You know, watch Surviving the Cut, season 2, episode 1 for the Navy SWCC, and Prospect Smith. If you're out there, come on the pod. I want to ask you, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing, Smith?
What are you doing, Smith? All
Matt?
right. I wrote it down so that I wouldn't take an hour rambling about it.
That's why I don't write mine down. That's why they're always quick and I just fumble through.
I echo my thoughts from Green Beret Spetsnaz. When it's a 5-on-5 battle to the death and the warriors have even training and even weaponry, the deciding factor is bound to be something arbitrary, like
intangible.
Yeah, right. You know, that, because the obvious thing that would decide in real life is context. You know, who's fighting, where are they fighting, etc. That being said, I would probably say that the Navy SEALs are definite contenders for perhaps the deadliest direct action unit in the world. They're definitely up there. And it's a crime that we never get to see the SAS on this show.
They literally talk about that in the aftermath.
Yeah.
Someone says like that's their most commonly requested
I'm
special
so
forces.
sad. And you know, the Israeli
SEAL versus SAS would be a badass episode.
I know the SAS would have been so wonderful because it would have been different than just like another American warrior. Though I am glad the Navy SEAL made it on to Deadliest.
How much like would they recreate the wet work mission? Do you think in their B-roll like it would just be exclusively just wet work?
Let's do this. One of the
They
experts
have like
is just
freight containers as a set.
one of the experts is just the voice actor that plays Captain Price.
Oh yeah.
As the spiritual successor to Green Beret versus
Hit
Spetsnaz,
marker sound.
you know, if KGB versus CIA is the rewrite, this is the sequel. I'd say it's a decently entertaining episode, but it falls short of its predecessor for 2 reasons. The first is the lack of guns. Green Beret versus Spetsnaz gave us 8. What is it? It gave us 8 guns, 2 grenades, and 2 melee weapons. This episode only delivers 4 guns, 1 explosive, and 1 melee. Ditch those knives and get us another firearm. This ain't the Stone Age. That's exactly what I wrote. The second is that the Israeli commandos are not a good antagonist for an American audience. These 2 forces share the same weapons, they train together, and they fight the same enemies. There's almost no conceivable scenario where Navy SEALs are fighting the IDF. Like, it just wouldn't happen. The Spetsnaz, embodied, you know, personified by Sonny and Maxime, are the perfect villains for the steely-eyed, square-jawed Green Berets. You know, you have like the quintessential American soldier versus like the evil Russian. You know, they even talk funny, and Jeff's like, I just see cold-blooded killer, you know.
Rocky 4.
The audience in that episode has someone to root for and someone to root against, unless of course you're rooting for the villain. And I think it's why the episode stirs up a lot of emotion and works really well, and why this episode at the end of the day feels a little flat.
Yeah.
Because there is no tension throughout the episode, unless you're watching it like as a 14-year-old boy staking everything on the Navy SEAL winning. Beyond that, there's no tension because it's like, well, you know, if the Israelis beat the Navy SEALs, I mean, it's just some weapon thing.
Yeah.
My final thought is, I think the SEALs would have unquestionably faced off against the Spetsnaz if they had done a Back for Blood season 2. And I'm excited for us to give our thoughts when we get to do our fan fiction Back for Blood. The last thing I wrote was, I want to see Rob and Colin versus Sonny and Maxime with 3 exclamation points.
You know, for my final thoughts, I had something very similar, although I came to a very different conclusion. And I will tell you why this episode feels a little bit off. So I think we all agree, definitely not a bad episode. I think a lot of people revere it as like one of the best of season 2. But I think most people can agree there's something missing, not quite that Green Beret versus Spetsnaz. And I was getting a little bit existential. This will be a nice capstone of season 2. Like, what really makes a Deadliest Warrior episode great? And I think what was missing from this episode was bullshit. If you look, we talk a lot about how we would make the show better. You know, we talk about if it's an ancient warrior. Oh, this test doesn't make any sense because this guy's never used it before. Oh, this test should be direct comparison. You know, and we talk a lot about when we get to remake the show, what do we do? And I'd like to think that we'd be very transparent with the Simmons stuff. But at that point, is the Deadliest Warrior?
That is an existential question.
That's what I mean. It's like the best episodes. The reason CIA versus KGB, I'd argue, is a more entertaining episode. It's one of the craziest, most off-the-wall episodes. Green Bay versus Spetsnaz is the perfect balance of intrigue, warriors, a lot of stuff you mentioned, but also you got the ballistic knife.
Yep.
Yeah.
You got
E-tool.
the E-tool, yeah.
The night vision pistol test.
Maybe they were actually really smart and they knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
Here we are talking about it. How many years later?
That's what I mean. Without a lot of stupid bullshit, it would not be Deadliest Warrior. And I think that's what this episode is missing.
Yeah.
At the same time, are you going to arbitrarily put in bullshit defeats the purpose and is not authentic. You got to have
for season 3.
Yeah. So, and that might even be why season 3 is so underwhelming, is because they try to cut down on that. They get a little more, in depth and granular. And
I think the same reason a lot of fans of the show actually like season 3, and they always wonder why we kind of make fun of it a little bit. And I think it's because from our perspective, exactly what you said, Craig, it is lacking like the bullshit factor. They do try to make it more, obviously it's not wholly factual, but they do try to make it more factual and bring on like historians and stuff,
which is what we tell them to do, but at the same time,
right,
so it's a little bit contradictory.
More than we do.
It's a very meta question to ponder, Craig.
Stay forward, stay tuned for some very factual episodes. George Washington versus Napoleon, Vampire versus Zombie, Kong versus Godzilla.
Yeah. So that might be kind of what we have to go into season 3 thinking about is which do we, obviously we know which one we prefer, but is really what we want a totally accurate, transparent show, or do we want a show that makes up numbers, that makes up tests?
Maybe we should be more transparent with ourselves.
Wow.
Can we do a bonus episode of Kong versus Godzilla? Deadliest
we can do whatever the hell we want.
Kong has a giant hammer.
Matt's mind went through the ringer in the past 15 minutes.
I'm like, wow. Questioning everything.
It's like you're sweating.
I need to go on the Joe Rogan podcast. Start. Anyways.
Okay.
Yeah. Stay tuned for we're going to do a season 2 wrap up episode.
Yep.
And
we can ponder your thoughts some more.
We'll probably have a couple gameplay stuff coming out, and then
probably already is out at this point.
And by the time you're seeing this, and then the season 3 Back for Blood fan fiction. We're still working out exactly how we want to do that.
We got some ideas.
Yeah, we do have some ideas. So we're working on it.
Yeah. So I guess say goodbye to season 3, and we'll see you
season 2.
Fuck, you did. I didn't hear you did.
You fucked it up.
Now, because of the Kieran thing, you have to leave it.
Thank you, everyone, for watching yet another season of the Deadliest Warrior podcast. It's been a great time. We had a good time this season.
Yes, we did.
And most importantly, Stay deadly.
Stay deadly.